Chapter 23. At Odds. Everyone needs a savior sometime. Jodi Brown. Survivor. The word had captured my attention as I'd flipped through the magazine years earlier. A photo of a bald woman wearing a pink pin on her chalk-white blouse revealed the story. Breast cancer. I read the article and landed again on that singular term. Survivor. Without knowing why, my mind had left the glossy pages in my hand and traveled far away. A full daydream filled my thoughts. Pushing my way through thick brush, I cleared a path until I came to a suitable spot. Using a walking stick I'd found along the way, I hacked at small branches until they fell to the ground. I wove shelter walls and a sleeping mat out of gangly green twigs and rods. The mossy wetness on one side of the tree denoted north. I built my lean-to on the opposite side to take advantage of the sun. Wild grasses padded the stick mattress atop the dirt. When I was hungry, I trekked to a nearby stream and caught crawdads. The exoskeletons cracked as I jerked them back in my hands. The meat was meager, but the creek overflowed with critters. The mountain spring water quenched my thirst and cleansed my hands and body. In the dream, I conquered every challenge I faced. If I were lost or abandoned in a forest, I would survive. Maybe it was because I grew up in the woods, but every time I thought about strength and endurance, I imagined trying to outlast the elements. The popular reality television show likely enhanced the childhood scenario in my mind, solidifying that idea. Survival meant maximizing your brain and your body. In all of my dreams, I'd been strong enough to make it. But in the hospital, I learned the truth. You can't become a survivor until you have to survive. Lying in bed, my eyes shut and body still, that awareness settled in my chest. The quiet of the present enveloped me, and I longed to be in the woods, eavesdropping on the chirping crickets, the twittering robins, and the buzzing dragonflies and mosquitoes. I yearned to feel the crunch of dried leaves and twigs beneath my feet, and the smell of soil, the life, even the decay. The trees reaching toward heaven meant that I could never be that lost, for I was still amidst God's creations. In the forest, I knew I could live. My own battle for life unrolled far differently than those I'd played out in my mind. In my dreams, I'd had control, at least some. There in the neuro unit, I turned into a practice dummy for poking, prodding, and experimenting. Life and all its decisions seemed out of my hands. The thought occurred to me that I was just a prop. One room, one bed, one patient. If I were not in that bed, another body would be. The goal was to help me, but only so I could move out and someone else could move in. No, I am not invisible. The only differentiation between my room and every other room in the massive facility was a handwritten label on the door. Brown. Dad posted it on the door of any room I occupied. Not exactly a welcome sign, it still surpassed the other doors with just numbers. It symbolized that life existed beyond the doorway. The paper reminded me I was still alive, even barely. Surviving was not so simple after all. A voice sounded in my mind. Remember, you can't have a miracle if you don't need a miracle. My guide. The difference between being a survivor and being a miracle is that a miracle means someone else does the saving. Perhaps I needed to be both. On Thursday, 3 days after my second craniotomy, a neurosurgery resident turned the lumbar drain off again. The closed position would force my body to regulate itself, and we'd know if the leak had sealed. If successful, I'd be able to elevate my head and move into a sitting position. The weight was on. Tolan left work early to be with me when the doctor came. Dr. Coldwell arrived at the end of the business day. The pain gripped me. I couldn't sit, so he gently rolled me to my side for the usual spinal fluid leak test. I think we all held our breath for half a minute as we waited and hoped to see nothing. I knew before they did. The fluid flowed through my nasal cavity before it dripped out of my nose. Dr. Coldwell shook his head. He excused himself and walked into the hall, carrying the wet tissue as evidence of the disappointment. My shoulders and chest heaved, and moans arose through my cries. The movement sent additional shockwaves through my body, but the distress overpowered the pain. Little could be said, so Tolan just crawled on top of the blankets and held me in his arms. My cries cycled from sobs to whimpers for over an hour. He stayed strong enough to hold both of us together while our world fell apart again. Tears washed away some of the frustrations, anger, disbelief, and hopelessness. My fear, however, remained in a deep reservoir inside. Dr. Coldwell returned and showed a pursed grin at the sight of Tolan next to me in bed. He let out a long breath before he started. The presence of fluid could mean the buildup of CSF in the nasal cavity before the surgery hasn't had a chance to leak out yet. He looked right at me. Since you've been on your back since the procedure, the liquid may not have been able to escape. He glanced toward the floor, then to Tolan. However, there is a good chance the leak continues. The only sure way to solve this is to surgically plug the eustachian tube, either by going through the ear or the nose. At Jodi's young age, going through the ear isn't a great option. It would permanently cut off hearing in that ear. Tolan tightened his grip around my shoulders. Going through the nose has fewer potential side effects, but it is still an experimental procedure, and there is only one person trained to even try, Dr. Coldwell explained. But would that seal the leak for good? Tolan pressed. Either option should seal the leak. It is now about weighing the potential risks. Of course, my hope is that the leak seals on its own. There is still a chance surgery won't be needed. Only once in my career have we had to seal the eustachian tube to plug a leak. Just as Dr. Coldwell finished explaining the procedure and possibilities, Dr. Shelton walked in. I heard the news, he stated. News traveled fast in the hospital. Tolan affirmed his statement with a nod and said, Dr. Coldwell explained the eustachian tube procedures to us. My colleague, Dr. Richard Orlandi, he's the one who would likely perform surgery through the nose, if it gets to that point. He's the only surgeon in the country who successfully completed this new, less invasive method to seal the eustachian tube, Dr. Shelton explained. If it comes down to surgery, well, let's just say you'd be 1 in a million, Jodi. So, you're telling me I'm not normal? I said with the best sarcasm I could offer. Normal doesn't begin to describe you, Dr. Shelton smiled. I've been trying to tell her that for years. Tolan winked at me and squeezed my shoulder. Whatever normal was, I had to admit, I wasn't it. Dad heard results over the phone. He'd been packing to leave for Hawaii. Both my mother and brother were graduating from college, so he planned to go back for the weekend celebration with the hope that our next meeting would be in the comforts of my home. Mom did not return to Hawaii for her own graduation. Even after she'd put off finishing her education for 30 years to raise her family, spent hours on research papers, juggled student and family life, she didn't fly home to don the cap and gown and walk in the processional ceremony. The rest of our family gathered across the sea for the commencement she chose not to attend. Guilt settled in my chest. Mom settled in at my bedside. Caressing my hand, she took over the roles of primary caregiver, head nurse, and information specialist. With Kay, my kind mother-in-law, at home with the children, my mother readied to stay with me through the continuing challenge. This is where I want to be, Jodi. I'm glad to be graduating. I am proud of myself for finishing. But that is just school. Tears slipped down my face. Warmth radiated inside me. Safe in her care, guilt at bay, I tried to sleep away a new onset of queasiness and pain. On Friday, Mom stayed with me while Tolan spent the day with the kids. His company hosted its annual party at a local amusement park, and we all knew they could use a day of normalcy and fun. The longer I lay there, the less I wanted to be awake. My body wandered on a different track than my mind. Consciousness required more energy than I had. Sleep and medication won. Dr. Coldwell had checked on me earlier in the day, and Mom had reported the nausea and increase on my pain scale. When he returned with his resident assistant, they entered quietly, checked the lumbar drain, and studied the charts and monitors. Are you feeling any better? Have your symptoms calmed? The doctor inquired. No, I whispered, still half asleep. He moved a stool near my bedside and sat down, close to my head. Here, let's have you turn and make sure nothing drips out. He placed his hands on my shoulder and head to help me turn for the simple test. Searing pain sliced through my head, neck, and shoulders. Don't! I yelled as my eyes shot open. Don't touch my head! My muscles tensed, bracing my head. I exerted all of my strength in my plea. Dr. Coldwell jerked back, his mouth open a bit, though he remained calm. The resident was less practiced at hiding his emotions. Both wore stunned expressions and flushed cheeks. I'm sorry, Dr. Coldwell said. Clearly that is uncomfortable for you. We'll wait on the test for now. He got up from the bed and jotted something down. I think she's getting worse, Mom said. Yes, I'm not sure why the antibiotics aren't doing their job. We are still looking into other possibilities, but we don't have any answers yet. I will let you know if anything comes up. Please alert me to the same. Mom nodded that she would. Soft whimpers escaped me, so I averted my eyes from the doorway. Mom knelt close and caressed my head. I'm so sorry, Joe, she said. I wish I could do something. She fought back the tears. I heard it in her voice. I was not the only one who was suffering. Until that moment, she seemed stalwart in her belief that everything would be okay. But facing her, I noticed her shoulders had dropped and her body slumped. Her inner strength was waning. Quiet settled into the room until the heaving started again. Mom grabbed the plastic tub, and I couldn't even sit up. I turned my head enough to deposit at least half of the vomit in the bucket. After the lurches stopped, Mom exchanged the plastic tub for a warm washcloth. She wiped my mouth and forehead, and then tried to comb my hair. I'll call a nurse to shower you to get the vomit out of your hair and gown. No, I moaned. She rinsed the cloth and started again. Her breathing became more audible every minute. Worn out from the late Friday night at the amusement park, Tolan stayed home with the kids on Saturday, trying to be a family. Mom stayed the night on the fold-out chair in the room. To my knowledge, she didn't step out of the room once. I slept under the watchful eye of my protector. Familiar voices sounded right next to me. I slept with an eye patch on my right eye, but even my left eye would not open. I had no energy to speak. My brain rushed to decipher what was happening, and my focus turned to the sounds in the room. I imagined the faces until a clear picture appeared in my mind. Brandy sat close to my bed, talking to my mom. They discussed me, but didn't speak to me. The weight in my chest and on my eyes was too heavy to push off. They visited for several minutes. Mom asked Brandy how she was doing, how her twin girls were. The girls are great, Brandy whispered. She hesitated before responding. They are growing so fast. They are best friends, but definitely have individual personalities. Brooklyn is smaller and darker. She looks just like Abby did. Abby. Brandy's angel Abby. When I heard Abby's name, I wondered if I would meet her soon in heaven. Part of me longed to hug Brandy and show her my gratitude. I visualized her blonde hair and contagious smile as she spoke. Their chat continued, and I realized I wasn't really there with them. The voices faded. I retreated inside my body and hoped the confusion would pass. Minutes, or hours, passed. My mind woke again. I struggled to open my eyes, but still couldn't. Mom, are you there? Papers ruffled and a hand rested on top of mine through the blanket on my bed. I'm right here, sweetie. Are you okay? I didn't know how to answer. The stiffness had traveled down from my shoulders and into my arms and sides. Massages and gentle rubs no longer helped. The pain went too deep. Inside, my body was starting to shut down and harden. Rigor mortis. It confused me. I thought that didn't happen until after you died. But those were things I could not say to my mom. Do you need anything, Joe? No. Neither of us spoke again. Her hand moved to my hair and forehead. She took cool cloths and wiped my brow. Either I was sweating or I had a fever. I suspected the latter. Her presence calmed my heart long enough to drift back into oblivion. Sometime later, she patted my hand and whispered, Joe, hun, can you hear me? I grunted the affirmative. I'm going home to Orem to shower and rest up. I'll be back tomorrow. okay? Time is it? I choked out. Getting late, about 10:30. You've slept a lot today. That's good. Hopefully it means the antibiotics are working, helping your body heal, she reassured me. So I'll see you tomorrow, probably early afternoon. Love you. You too, I replied. I thought I heard her blow me a kiss as she left. Chapter 24. The Beyond. Every man must do two things alone. He must do his own believing and his own dying. Martin Luther. June 7th, 2009. Sunday, I awoke, and my eyes actually opened. The room appeared distant, as if I were behind a camera. I sensed a disconnect. Where I had once been totally aware of every machine, beep, and prick, I no longer felt involved. My body remained in the picture, yet I was behind the lens at the same time. The weekend guy walked in and drew more blood than usual. I watched vial after vial fill until an entire tray of my blood was neatly packed and labeled, ready for the lab. I didn't even feel the needle poke my arm. Next came the nurse, who prepped me for an anti-seizure shot in my abdomen. Not my favorite injection. After so many weeks of shots, faded pink circles about 4 millimeters around had created train tracks across the whole front of my stomach. My boys could have raced Hot Wheels side by side over the extensive path. We're running out of room on your tiny tummy here, so I'm going to roll you over a bit so we can start on your side, the nurse informed me. These work best in certain locations, so we need to stay with your midsection. Sorry, I've heard these shots are thick and painful, but they seem to be doing their job, so we need to keep at it. I didn't answer, but she pushed my hip up without any movement to my head. She found a fresh spot on my side and plunged me with the poison. She called it medication, but I knew it was toxic too. Otherwise, the other 100 marks would have gone away. The needle forced the gel solution into me, but I suffered no pain. My body felt increasingly empty, as if the meds and IVs were sucking the life out of me instead of into me. She gently laid me back down and tucked the sheets around my shoulders, arms, and legs. Oh, your sheets are wet. She grabbed the covers from the bottom of the bed and lifted them all at once. I'm so sorry, Jodi. I wish one of us had noticed sooner. Your catheter broke and leaked all over the bed. I'll hurry and get someone in here to help me clean you up and change your sheets. The nurse left the room and returned with a familiar CNA. Minutes later, new sheets tucked under my body, yet I remained frozen. I hadn't even noticed the wetness on my legs and bed. The morning blurred by. No mom, no dad, no Tolan. No university student visitors. No guests at all. It was better that way. I just needed to be alone. Hours passed. I became acutely aware of my internal system, but more detached from my surroundings. As if examining my body under a microscope, I saw every rush of blood after my heart pumped and pushed life-saving antibiotics through miles of vein and artery highways. The triple antibiotic treatment flowed through me, but it seemed everything got lost between two hives of activity, my head and my heart, where all focus appeared intense at simply keeping me alive. Will my heart stop first, or will my brain finally power down, tell my body it's over, and all the systems will shut off at once? Through all these thoughts, my lungs filled and emptied repeatedly, though the process seemed labored and slow. I heard Tolan and Mom talking to each other as they entered the room, so I forced my eyes open. At the foot of my bed stood a new IV tower, with cords stringing into both feet. I looked to my right and saw another tower, my usual, still chained to my arm. A glance to my left showed yet another, those tubes running into my left arm. The 4 towers trapped me on every side. I hadn't been conscious when the nurse attached small hoses to my arm and feet, but the medical scenario echoed what I felt inside. I was dying. In the last 24 hours, I'd vomited on my hair, chest, and gown, had catheters break, and laid in my own urine, but these facts seemed the least of anyone's concerns. Since my mother's offer to wash my hair, no one had ordered, asked, or even offered to bathe me. I was dry, but far from clean. The indifference to my outward physical demise spoke as another sign. Nausea rumbled my gut, and shooting pain traveled from my head to the rigid pathways in my body. I turned my head to the edge of the bed. Mom dropped her purse and grabbed a plastic pail just in time to catch the only thing left in my body to come out: medicated fluid and chunks of pills. When the heaving stopped, my head went back to my pillow, and I tried to right myself. Tolan sat down and took a package out of his bag. The smile on his face looked like a faded mask, but his voice was upbeat. "You've got mail." He tore the wrapping off the box and lifted each item so I could see the contents. A bag of dried mangoes emerged first, followed by a box of chocolate-covered macadamia nuts. Then he pulled out a plastic case. "Looks like a video. Let's watch it," he said. He opened the armoire doors that hid the DVD player and inserted the disc. The sounds of aloha filled the room as videos of swaying palm trees filled the screen. "Aloha from your ohana at the Polynesian Cultural Center," called the group of costumed dancers on the screen. They held a large sign that read, "Get well soon, Jodi." I'd been retreating deep into my body for days, but the sights and sounds of the islands pulled me out of my inner trance. My father's job as the CEO of the Polynesian Cultural Center, PCC, meant Hawaii was more than a tourist stop for us. It was a second home. My parents' house on Naniloa Loop, right across from the PCC and just a quarter mile from the beach, was Grandma and Grandpa Orgill's house to my children, the only home they had ever known for their grandparents. To them, the PCC starred as the biggest, most spectacular playground they could ever ask for. The beautiful, giving Polynesian people, the spirit of aloha, and the smell of the salty ocean water lapping against the sandy beaches of Oahu had become part of us. Hawaii represented a place of welcome, love, and family. "Look, there's Longo," Mom said as she pointed to our dear friend on the screen. One after another, the faces and voices of people we loved appeared before our eyes. "Bula Vinaka from Fiji! We love you, Jodi. Get well soon!" The eyes of dark-skinned Fijians shone brightly as their beautiful spirits lit up the television. "Talofa! Love and best wishes from the islands of Samoa." I recognized Cap, the Samoan chief, as he waved into the camera and flashed his incredible, friendly smile. Dancers, servers, custodial workers, tour guides, and groundskeepers surrounded him, all holding signs and well wishes. I looked at Tolan, his eyes transfixed on the screen. His hand repeatedly dipped into the bag of dried mangoes. He saw me stare and answered the question I didn't ask. "I'm only going to eat a few. Dried mangoes are my favorite. Do you want some?" "No." A small chuckle escaped my throat, the first moment of joy I'd felt in days. I realized for a moment how good it felt to see him happy. His pleasure, even the tiniest bit, lifted me. I turned back to the TV and watched scenes of love unfold to the sounds of the Hawaiian version of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. The timing of the package's arrival could not have been coincidence. At one of my darkest moments, it hit me again that the sun was still shining somewhere. Purple pansies, Easter lilies, butter and snow-colored daisies, and rosy alstroemerias decorated my room. The last time I'd seen so many flowers had been at my grandmother's funeral. Despite living in a tropical sanctuary, respite receded as an ocean tide. Quiet pervaded the halls and corridors surrounding my room. Few bodies passed my door, and fewer entered. Aloha faded, and I retreated farther inside my body. The body I inhabited no longer felt like mine. My systems continued to disconnect from my awareness and control. They seemed to shut down, one at a time, leaving only a worn shell. So this is what it feels like to die. I did not give up. I simply realized it was no longer my choice. For months, I had done everything anyone told me to do. I trusted the doctors, agreed to every test, submitted my body to every poke and procedure, and waited for results. Tolan and Mom stayed by my side. Mom made hushed phone calls with a worried look on her face. The phone in room 504 rang. I supposed word of my deteriorating condition had spread to my family, all of whom were gathered in Hawaii, where we should have been. Tolan had canceled our tickets when we realized our little family would not be able to make the grand trip, no matter how big the celebration. Mom held the phone up to my ear. "Joe, I know it's hard," Tammy said, "but you've got to keep fighting. Be strong." Her voice cracked. I groaned into the phone so she would know I was there. But for the first time, I did not make any promises. "We need you. Your family needs you. Your kids need their mother. Please, Joe, hang on," she pleaded. I could hear the desperation in her voice, even from 3,000 miles away. "I don't know if I can, Tam." I knew what she didn't. It was no longer my fight to win. "My family will all be an ocean away when it happens. They won't see me until it's too late." The strange symptoms continued to bore into my brain and spread through my body. 2 nurses came in with a bedpan and asked me to sit up a little. It had been too long since I'd had a bowel movement. With one on each side of me, they tried to sit me up so my legs hung over the edge of the bed. The very movement made me collapse. "Sorry," I moaned. "Can't do it." The kind nurse with the frizzy auburn hair laid me back down and covered me up. Then she lifted my backside and slid the pan under my bottom. "See if you can try," she pleaded. I knew it was no use. If I pushed my body in any way, it would push back and the game would be over. The metal pan stayed under my bottom for over an hour, straining my back as I attempted to hold myself in position. Just as I had known, nothing came. Nothing changed. The nurse returned, removed the bedpan, and tucked my gown back under my body. My humanity left faster each minute. Diminished to a rag doll, dressed, undressed, and positioned by every person in scrubs that entered the room. The quiet in my head grew louder, and the growing buzz in the room dimmed. When Dad's call came, Mom's face paled. She glanced at me with a heartbroken but loving smile and left the room. When he'd gone home for my brother's graduation only a few days earlier, we'd both hoped I'd be out of the hospital by the time he returned. Mom returned a moment later and handed me the phone. Dad spoke slower and lower than usual. He reminded me that my Grandma Lisenby watched over me. Then he said, "I'm leaving here soon, catching the red-eye flight. I'll see you in the morning, Joe." When I heard his plans, my mind drifted back to a humid summer day in 1981. In a moment of near panic, Dad scanned the surface of the pond, looking for the familiar pink cheeks, brown eyes, and blonde hair playing happily in the water. What he saw frightened him beyond his greatest imagination. He did not see the big smile of his little girl laughing and splashing in the pond. He saw only a few locks of golden hair floating on top of the water. As he ran from his spot on the shore, hoping and praying to get there in time, he saw the top of her tiny head bobbing up and down, but never high enough for his young daughter to get any air. He ran to the edge and jumped into the water, half swimming, half running to her. Everyone around him seemed oblivious to his panic and her disappearance. He trudged through the murky water, stirring up mud and debris. He swam around dozens of others playing in the pond. The 4th of July party celebration ended, and the battle started. When he finally reached the spot, he grabbed under the water and pulled her head and body up, pleading aloud for her to breathe. Coughing up a mouthful of water, she grabbed his arm, scared but alive. I'd heard the story a few times before, each told with my father's profound, tearful gratitude that I'd lived through the terrifying event years earlier. As I listened to Dad on the phone in the hospital, I realized the outcome of his race to save my life would not end the same way. He wanted to grab me out of the water and see the life come back into my face again, but this time, he would be too late. The next morning he would see my body, but I would be gone. "Hang in there, Joe. I love you. I'll see you in a few hours," he said. All I could say to the first man in my life was, "I love you. Know that I love you." Tears ran down Mom's face. Dad said goodbye. She placed the phone on the table and then laid her hand in mine. She caressed my palm, wiped my head, and whispered to hang on. My mother sat next to me, but I lay fading from life, far from my own children. Images of Trendon, Lindy, Kaysen, and Davin engrossed my mind. When I'd last seen them, we'd snuggled together watching an animated movie in my room. After they had left, I found popcorn in nooks of the bed for days. But in that moment, I didn't know if they sat quietly reading books with Grandma Brown or if they were running around the living room, like they did the day when London Bridge came crashing down on us. I only knew I would not get to say goodbye, nor would they. I wouldn't get to hold them in my arms, kiss their foreheads, or whisper, "I love your face," one last time. 2 months earlier, Tolan had cried in the car, wondering how, decades before, his Grandpa Pringle had delivered the news of his wife's death to their children. I'd told him then that it wouldn't happen to us. I was wrong. I didn't want to envision the scene when Tolan had to break the news. The irony hit me that perhaps death would serve as my final lesson in learning I couldn't control life. Air crept into my lungs and through my nose, but I couldn't get enough to fill my chest. I didn't see angels or Grandma Lisenby coming to greet me, but surely the end was near. Suddenly, all fear of death fled my mind. Dying would soothe away my troubles, as long as I knew I had really lived. I pictured my children, Dad, and siblings next to Tolan and Mom at my bedside. Some languages and cultures feature many forms of the word love. I needed all of them to encompass the feelings of my heart. I've loved deeply and unconditionally. Surely I have lived deeply, too. Mom's words broke me from my thoughts. "Hold on, we'll get through this." Who was she trying to convince? Mom smiled, patted my hand, and placed it gently in Tolan's. Then she walked out. Even from the hallway, I heard her loud exhale and gasp for air. I don't remember any words Tolan said to me. He may have spoken, or perhaps he sat in silence. Bloodshot eyes matched his sallow face. The grief would be his. The guilt from leaving him would be mine, forever. Even in my sadness, I could not squeeze tears from an empty canteen. "I love you. Know that I love you. Just know that I love you." The phrase I uttered to my father minutes before held the only words with meaning in that moment. I repeated the expression hundreds of times, though only a few words were vocal. Please, he must understand. I'm not choosing to leave him. Whether my heart sped up or slowed down, I could no longer tell. But whatever happened inside signaled me that only seconds remained. I had nothing left to give. The fight was over. I never thought it would end this way. Tolan still held my hand. He didn't know it was time. I guessed if he knew, he'd have climbed onto the bed and held me in his arms. With my last remaining strength, I squeezed Tolan's hand. He squeezed back. I let out a long, shallow breath. Dear God, I am ready now. Then I sucked in a small gulp of air, held my breath, and waited. A giant swell of heat engulfed me as if large, powerful arms wrapped around and enveloped my whole being. Light descended on me as sunbeams falling from heaven. Not heat, love. I leaned in and accepted the security and strength. All else left my mind. My body stayed earthbound, Tolan's hand still holding mine, but the pain, questions, and worry faded. Contentment, light, and tenderness overcame my crippled body. The air left my chest. My final act of life. It's going to be okay. Peace. Chapter 25. Time. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. J.R.R. Tolkien. A shudder awakened my body, and the shivers from the fever seeped back in. The light, love, and peace departed. My breathing increased, and panic set in. I tried to find the peace again. Instead, I saw little Davin's face, his intense sapphire eyes staring at me, and giggles pouring from his grinning mouth. His tiny voice was muffled, but the sounds were enough. "Fight, Jodi, fight. Davin needs his mom." The guide. The instant I opened my eyes, Davin's face flickered away, and pain rushed into every crevice of my being. I yearned for the warmth, but Tolan's face begged me not to give in. A sudden determination welled up in my heart. "I am not leaving you. I am not giving up. Davin must know his mother. I need to live. For my family." I groaned, very aware of the difference between dying peacefully and living painfully. Tolan tightened his grip on my hand, as if to say, "Hold on." Without a knock, the door to my room opened. Someone new arrived. Tolan's father, Larry, and his grandfather, George Pringle, entered. Grandpa Pringle had just flown in from California, and they came directly to the hospital. Grandpa Pringle? Did I know he was coming? Is he here to help Tolan tell the kids when I... The future wavered, my mind no longer sure. Hushed words passed between small groups in the room. Within moments, hands heavied my head, and Grandpa Pringle began. Jodi Orgill Brown. His voice rang clear and strong. His prayer on my behalf lasted a few minutes, but I only recall one phrase. "This night will be your lowest point. From this time forward, your body will begin to heal." The prayer ended, and a group of neurosurgery residents congregated. One of them, an unfamiliar face, suggested a test for an uncommon condition that can result from brain surgery. They wheeled me to a CT imaging room and slid a board under my back. I stiffened in the process, afraid any movement would send me further spiraling. But as they moved me onto the gurney, the board slid my entire body nearly effortlessly from one location to the other, with little movement to my head or body. The CT machine scanned my brain, and within moments, the radiologist and the residents discovered the culprit. The perpetrator was pneumocephalus, a rare, often fatal complication from brain surgery. Intracranial pneumocephalus is defined simply as the presence of gas or air in the cranial cavity. The spinal fluid that leaked from my brain did not travel a one-way road. An open route allowed fluid out and air in. In the neurointensive care unit, strangers pushed needles into my feet. A nurse masked my face and pumped cool air into my lungs, but more importantly, into my brain. Pure oxygen. The simple treatment for pneumocephalus rivaled the simple definition, but no one treated the condition as routine. The rush of IVs and the air blowing into my face overwhelmed me. How much time passed since I'd been wrapped in the warmth? I longed to return to the light and end the hurt. Dying seemed so much easier, serene and comfortable. Living required facing the agony of every movement and every minute. Heavy medications pushed into my veins and forced me to give in. The next morning, I sensed a greater connection to my body, which meant pain, but not death. Perhaps we'd won the fight. I didn't remember them leaving, but Tolan and Mom were nowhere in sight. The faces whizzing around no longer creased with alarm as they had the night before. Dr. Coldwell walked to my bedside, pulled the mask off my face, and looked me in the eyes. "Enough of the mask for now. After 12 hours of pure oxygen, you should feel pain relief. From what I hear, was an exciting night. Your vitals are coming back up. So, how are you?" I waited for my mind to perform a swift recon mission to check my systems. "A little better," I replied. "Better is good. We aren't going to wait any longer. You are stable enough for surgery, so you're on the schedule with Dr. Orlandi for this afternoon. It's time to seal this leak and get you fixed. Steady voice, confident and sure. As much as I didn't want a third brain surgery, it was time to live again. Chapter 26. Whole or whole? We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. Anais Nin. June 8th, 2009. Dr. Orlandi loomed over me larger than life. He carried his own ambiance, which made me like and trust him. He knew me long before we met in person. The team of specialists had decided the experimental procedure through the nose provided the best option. Timing was critical, and Dr. Orlandi offered the greatest chance for success. While I slept through the anesthesia-induced nap, the doctor found and then mended the holes in my brain using a seamstress needle and thread method, an approach he helped pioneer. Mine was only the 4th procedure of its kind ever completed. Dad arrived back in town before surgery ended. His trip home cut short. Mom's worried phone call the night before prompted his quick return. I don't know what thoughts ruled his mind during the 6-hour flight, but I was grateful his little girl hadn't slipped under the water for good. He again took his place at the foot of my bed. That night should have been a chance for my body to begin the recovery process, but someone must have forgotten to tell that to the medical staff. 3 different times before sunup, at 2:30, 4, and 6 a.m., phlebotomists came in and drew vials of blood, 9 in all. None of the bloodsuckers knew what necessitated the night draws. I could only wonder. Dawn rose and my spirits soared with it. The need for sleep was ever present, but for the first time in a week, a different sensation hit me. Hunger. "Okay, Jodo, we've got some cream of wheat for you. Doesn't that sound good?" Dad laughed as he handed me the bowl. It did sound good. Soothing. I spooned the hot cereal into my mouth and attempted to keep it from dripping down my chin. As expected, the cereal did not taste normal, and my empty stomach protested even the smallest bits of food. But even the feeling of hunger was progress. We passed the time moving me. Again. My move to room 510 made the 8th room I'd occupied in my 28 days in the hospital. Whether the move triggered the headache or not, I didn't know, but after riding in the bed to the new room, I tried to settle down to calm my head. "Sorry you're feeling crummy again. Want me to get the nurse and see if you can have more painkiller?" Dad asked as he unloaded my belongings from a cart. "No, it's okay. This is more of a throbbing headache, which still isn't fun, but I don't think it's a spinal headache. I can handle this one." "Well, that's great news." Headaches may not be great news to some people, but I knew what he meant. If the spinal leak really sealed with the 3rd surgery, there were many different reasons to celebrate. I drifted off to sleep and woke an hour later, feeling dry. Drainage filled my nose, which meant I could only breathe through my mouth. My lips cracked and my throat was parched. "Water," I whispered. Dad jumped up from the chair and brought me a mug of water and ice. I took a few gulps of the cool liquid, only to vomit it back up moments later, along with the cream of wheat from earlier. "I guess living on meds for a week wreaks havoc on your stomach," Dad said. "We better ease you back into this." No more water or cereal. Only the IV diet seemed to work. Mom came to visit, and she and Dad took turns wetting my lips with a small sponge. They gave me ice chips every few minutes, but we were careful not to try too much at once. I'd done the same thing just months earlier when my Grandma Lisenby was in her final days. She no longer ate any food then, only soaked her lips and sucked on ice chips. Sucking on the ice chips, I realized I had empathy for Grandma in ways I never could have before. "Here, the doctor would like you to try this Ensure drink. He thinks it may stay down a little better than food." I nodded my okay, and the CNA handed me the vanilla-flavored drink, packed with protein and vitamins. She left a stock of them in different flavors and encouraged me to drink as many as I could throughout the day. Many times I had pleaded with my sweet grandmother to drink a little Ensure so her depleted body would gain strength. The tables had really turned. The tiny straw was tricky, but I used the left side of my mouth and drank a few sips of the chalky fluid. I gagged it and ruefully thought about how much I missed Grandma, and how sorry I was I'd made her drink the Ensure. "Water. I need water," I insisted. "You sure that's a good idea, Joe?" Mom asked. I didn't care if it was a good idea or not. If I was going to drink chalk, I wanted something to wash it down. Mom handed me a full water jug, and I slowly drank enough to rinse the residue in my mouth. Almost 2 hours later, I finally finished the entire 6-ounce can. By evening, the Ensure came up, and once it started, I could not stop throwing up. When the marathon ended, I was wiped out. The headache struck again with full force. Talking, movement, and drinking were reduced to 0. Dad stayed as long as he could, but my condition didn't improve. He left late, but Mom stayed. The look on her face told me she wasn't going to go until she knew I was okay. I vomited and dry heaved much of the night, but when I woke the next morning, she was still there. Sometime during the night, she'd moved from the chair to the couch to sleep. Watching her, I wondered how Mom and Dad felt spending so many hours sitting in the hospital. I supposed it was harder on them than me. While I slept and had medications to dull my pain and senses, they were awake and alert of every moment and every setback. I knew I would do the same for my children, but no one ever plans to spend an entire month in a medical center. I hoped the setbacks were over for now. To my dismay, the new day brought new symptoms. The muscles in my neck tightened with painful spasms. Dad arrived early in the day and alternated ice packs and heating pads to try and reduce the seizures in my neck and shoulders. Dr. Shelton checked on me and seemed concerned by my condition. "We're taking you off all the antibiotics now," he said. I noticed he was speaking to me again instead of to my dad about me. "They are likely contributing to the nausea. Hopefully, you won't need them any longer. What you do need is nutrition and rest to regain your strength, to go home." The news relieved me. The 3 powerful antibiotics had, in fact, wreaked as much havoc on my body as they did good. It had been days since I'd seen my children. I knew why. I didn't want them to see me so sick, and I imagined Tolan felt the same way. They had been close to my heart when I was dying, but I realized they probably didn't know that. I called home, and Tolan's mom, Kay, answered the phone. I don't know why that surprised me. With Tolan at work and Mom with me, I should have figured she would be there, but it hadn't occurred to me. I wondered how many times she had taken care of my family without me knowing. That likely meant others had done the same thing. "Hi, it's Jodi." "Well, my goodness, it's good to hear your voice. How are you?" "Tired, and really missing the kiddos." "I can imagine that. They've been asking when they can come visit, but Tolan and I thought we'd give you another day or 2. When I was in the hospital, I didn't want visitors. I just wanted to get out of there, not spend my time trying to entertain guests." Though I knew exactly what she meant, I was grateful I'd had so much company. The visits created wonderful distractions from the pain and boredom of life in the hospital. I hadn't seen many people in the past few days. If they came, I wasn't aware. Kay continued, "And I think your parents actually told people not to come, just to let you rest." "That makes sense. I wouldn't be good company now anyway," I replied. I hadn't thought about it, but explained why I'd had so few guests over the past days. "Are the kids home? Can I say hi?" "Trendon is out playing, and David is down for a nap. But Lindy and Kaysen are here. Let me get them for you." A moment later, I heard a little voice in the background. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, Mr. Kaysen. How are you doing, buddy?" "Good, but I miss you. Is your eye getting better?" "Well, it's not better yet, but Grandma Orgill brought me some more little bean bags to help hold it closed." "Yeah, we helped her make them. We put some rice inside one of them and pennies in another." I laughed, grateful to talk to my little guy. He told me about riding his big wheel and summer adventures in the neighborhood. "Love you, Mom. Lindy wants to talk now." "Love your face, Mr. C." I heard little noises in the background as the phone switched hands. "Hi, Mom. Are you coming home now?" Lindy asked. "Hi, sweetie. Well, not yet, but hopefully soon. We think the latest surgery fixed the problem, so now I just have to get stronger and healthier, then I can come home." "Has it been a year yet?" "Has what been a year?" Since you've been in the hospital. Has it been a year yet? She thought I'd been gone a year? My heart nearly skipped a beat. No, not a year, but it has been a month. A really long month, huh? Yeah, the girls from church, they came over and planted flowers a long time ago, and now they are growing outside, and you haven't even seen them yet. Dad is letting me help water them so they don't die before you come home. Thank you, Lindy. I'm sure you are doing a great job. I am ready to leave the hospital, but I'm not quite well enough to come home yet. Does that make sense? I guess so. Our conversation gave me new insight on what my hospital experience had been like for my children. I think we'd all taken motherhood for granted before. I doubted we would again. Tell everyone I said hello, and thank Grandma Brown for taking such good care of you. I will. Love you, Mom. I hope you really can come home soon. Me too. Love you, sweetie. Bye. I spent the afternoon imagining all the activities I would do at home with my children. Mom stayed on the fold-out bed most of the day and left early in the evening. The night nurse came in, scribbled down numbers from my monitors, and put the chart back on the cart and wheeled it out. She grabbed an ice cup and left it on my tray. I'll be back in soon to change your IV bag and check on you. If you need anything before then, just call, she said with a smile. The ice chips were my favorite kind, the pebble-sized pieces that worked perfectly for sucking or biting. I put one in my mouth and just let it dissolve on my dry tongue. The terrible taste and dryness in my mouth seemed to melt along with the ice. For more than a week, I'd been so lost in my body, I'd almost forgotten the routines of life. Eat, drink, brush, shower, bathroom. When was the last time I got up to brush my teeth or go to the bathroom? Physical needs dominated my thoughts. The monitor beeped, and green, jagged lines climbed the screen in a pattern fit to exhaust any hiker. The blood pressure cuff hummed as it filled its lungs, held its breath around my arm, then swooshed out the air after the reading. Same as always. Then I saw the large, empty IV bag hanging from the bar by one loop, reminiscent of a child trying to hold on to the monkey bars. A quick hand to my stomach confirmed that the entire day's worth of IVs were dammed inside my bladder. I grabbed the nurse call button and pressed. The normal 2-minute wait dragged, and I was sure the barrier was about to give. Press. People always told me you only need to push a crosswalk sign once to alert the system that a pedestrian is waiting. That never stopped me from pressing it over and over again, willing the light to change faster. This was no different. Press. The intensity grew within. I wanted to get up, but I hadn't been upright for days. I could not do it on my own. Press, press, press. The inevitability hit me about the same time the urine warmed my legs and then sank into my sheets. I wasn't sure if I wanted to swear or cry. Frustrated, I pressed the button again and waited for rescue. The nurse entered a minute later. The bed is soaked. I wet myself. No one came and I couldn't get up, I said like a child apologizing for having an accident. Oh, I'm sure some of the tubes were just leaking, hun. It's fine. Her face appeared normal and unconcerned. Tubes leaking? You've been using catheters and bedpans for days now, sweetie. Remember? One of the catheter tubes probably just came loose. Does she really believe that, or is she trying to spare me the humiliation of lying in my own urine? She left the room and returned with clean linens and a CNA to help with the changing process. Well, you were right. I checked the chart. Someone removed the catheter yesterday afternoon after it leaked and broke, but they forgot to mention that on the shift change. Her face showed remorse before she said it. Sorry. I didn't know if I should be more or less embarrassed knowing I was right. The two ladies lifted me onto a plastic table, wheeled in for the purpose, and quickly changed my bedding, sheets, and pillowcases. I know it hurts, but we're going to lean you up to wash you off. The first lady held me forward, while the second used a wet cloth and dry towel to wipe down my back. Then I was down on my back, and they lifted my hips and legs and repeated the process. Minutes later, I was freshly gowned and back on my bed. There, that should be better, all dry now. The CNA left the nurse to tuck all the tubes and wires back into place, and then she too left the room. The compassionate nurses helped me immediately upon discovering the situation. I tried to convince myself it was okay, but reality blared. My body was not my own. Day 29 started better than the previous days. I inclined the bed and lay in a slightly vertical position for more than 30 minutes. Without the antibiotics, my stomach settled, and I craved something more than IV fluids. Dad gladly ordered whatever sounded good. Tolan arrived late in the morning, earlier than normal. No matter what frustrations he felt, he never showed them to me. I knew my husband was not a perfect man, but he amazed me. I pushed myself upright, lifted by a surge of energy. Tolan grinned mischievously and climbed on the bed next to me. "Move, move," I said. Tolan looked at me, surprised, almost hurt. "You're sitting on my IV," I blurted. He turned and saw the clear plastic tube behind his back. He scooted over and I rearranged the tubes and wires until we untangled. Tolan leaned back onto the headrest, put his arm around me, and nestled me to his chest. At last, together again. Dad grabbed his camera and snapped a picture. I'd told my family from the start to document the event, but I had no idea this day would create so many photo ops. Tolan held me while I rested. Though we were as different as night and day, at the very core, we both wanted the same things. With my head safely on his chest, I realized real love means accepting all the differences. Our polar opposite approaches to life meant we were constantly compromising, an area where we both had room for improvement, but I hoped we had plenty of time left together to work on it. He stayed next to me for almost an hour. His arm around me spoke louder than any words we said. "You ready to try eating again?" the nurse asked. "Yes, hopefully I can keep it down this time." I remembered the last time I'd eaten and wanted to be cautious. We started with a little Ensure and a few grapes and berries an hour later. Then I ate a yogurt and managed to keep everything down. My taste hadn't returned, but at least my appetite had. "This is great, Joe. This is exactly the progress we wanted to see. Hooray for raspberries and yogurt," Dad cheered. The nurse, Christy, reported the good news to the doctors and came back a few hours later. "Okay, since you are keeping a little food down, Dr. Coldwell wants me to stop the IV fluids and have you start getting nourishment through food again. We'll give you painkiller pills from here on out. I'm leaving the line in just in case, but you'll be on your own for food." The announcement displayed another sign of progress. I took an afternoon nap while Dad tapped away on his laptop by the window. "Well, hiya, Joe," he said when I woke. "You've been out for a long time, and you looked more peaceful resting than I've seen you in weeks. How were you feeling?" "Good. Better. Feeling better," I answered. "When you were sleeping, I posted the picture of you and Tolan cuddling on the bed. You've gotten tons of comments on the blog in response to that one. You ready?" I nodded, and Dad started reading. "I'm so happy to hear your small but encouraging progress. I haven't written in a long time, but I've been keeping up with your ups and downs and hoping and praying for you and your family. Every time I get low about this, that, and the other, and I check in with you and think, wow, that lady is fighting and having such faith. I need to do better. I need to have more courage. So thank you for your good example. May the progress continue. Dorothea." "Now, who is that again?" Dad asked. "A friend of a friend. I've never met her, but she has really reached out to me on the blog and in email. It's strange that people I don't even know are rooting for me." "Yes, but it's wonderful." "Okay, let's keep reading. Here is one from Brandon and Debbie Rhodes. Everyone needs a good snuggle once in a while. That seems to fix a lot of things and makes everything just a little bit better. Glad to see things are slowly improving. It's so exciting for us to hear that you are maybe getting a little relief from the serious suffering you've been experiencing for the last month. It's funny, but when you feel better, we feel better. We love you and hope great things continue today. Love, the Rhodes." The sentiment described my feelings as a parent when my children were good. So was I. When they were sick, I hurt with them. Dad finished the blog notes with one from my cousin, Susan. "Uncle Vaughn, I really smiled while reading this post, much more so than any other. I laughed about Tolan hopping into bed and was so happy to know that Jodi loved having him there. The small signs of progress are big signs of improvement, and I'm impressed, as always, with Jodi's strength, faith, and commitment. What an example she has been throughout all of this. We love you, Jodi, and are praying for your continued strength. Hug. If anyone can do this, you can. Hang in there, darlin'. With love, Susan O.R. I smiled when Dad showed me all the capital letters, exclamation marks, and smiley faces scattered on the page. This is the best part of the day, hearing the comments on the blog, I said. Do you think they know they are willing me to get better? I love them, even the ones I don't know. Together, we marveled at the goodness of strangers and loved ones. It was the perfect end to the day. Chemicals could no longer mask the taint in the air. Looking down at my gown and body, I conceded I was a big part of the problem. Weeks in bed had taken their toll. A shower topped my priority list. A young 20-something guy walked into my room. He had olive skin and dark hair just past his shoulders. He went to the whiteboard, changed the date, and wrote his name, Lucas, on the board under CNA on shift. Female CNAs cared for me for a month, but the moment I could finally bathe again, I had a guy. Ironic. He approached and took my vitals. Lucas, is Heather working today? Or Christy? Can you see if one of them has time to wash my hair this morning? A shower would have been heavenly, but considering the situation, I thought I'd better not press too much. I know they are busy, but it has been days, so I was hoping someone could help me. Yes, I'm desperate. His dark eyes met mine, and he said, I can wash your hair. Give me a few minutes. I'll come back after I check on my other patients. Oh, okay, thanks, I replied. Not the answer I wanted. I wanted one of the girls I trusted. I just wanted a girl. I sighed and waited for him to finish. The truth was, I wanted to go home and take a bath, all by myself. Frustration mounted, with little I could do. Half an hour later, Lucas returned with towels and a stack of black garbage bags. He moved the garbage can to the head of the bed, opened all the black bags, and placed a slew of product bottles nearby. It takes a little while to get it set up, but it should work. His voice was soft and kind. He helped me scoot to the bottom of the bed, and he covered the pillows and garbage bags draped into the trash bin. Then he stepped out of the room and came back with a cart holding several pitchers of water and steaming towels. Okay, slide up and lay your head as close to the top of the pillow as is comfortable. Let out a deep breath and try to relax if you can, he urged. I grabbed a special eye patch to make sure soapy water didn't fall into my eye. Once situated, I moved into place, exhaled, and closed my other eye. Lucas's hands brushed the hair off my forehead, back onto my head. He poured warm water right at my hairline so it trickled through my hair, hit the black water slide, and landed in the trash can below. The right half of my head had thousands of little hairs that were starting to grow back in, and he was careful to make sure the water ran through the forest of new hair as well as the long locks on the other side. My pulse slowed as the heated water ran over my hair and scalp. With a little music, I decided it could almost be a spa. Once all my hair was wet, he poured the shampoo into his hand and worked it through my hair and onto my head. Lucas was careful not to touch my scar, but he gently massaged my scalp along with my hair. He could have dumped the shampoo on and rinsed it off in 60 seconds, but instead, his hands worked slowly and gently for the next half an hour, first with the shampoo and then the conditioner. The young stranger ran his fingers through my hair and let the warm water splash all over my head before falling into the tiny lake below. His simple yet profound act of kindness rejuvenated me. Lucas combed through the tresses of hair before he gathered the supplies from around my pillow and bed. Thank you, I mumbled, knowing the words were inadequate. I truly appreciate it. Sorry I can't stay, but I can come back if you need anything, he replied. It's okay. Go ahead. That was wonderful. Thank you. You are welcome. He smiled and left. After that shift, I never saw Lucas again. I said silent words of thanks for the gentle touch of a stranger's hand. No matter what else happened, I knew it was going to be a good day. Dr. Coldwell entered and asked me to perform the usual test. He helped me to a sitting position. I leaned my head forward, and together, we waited. Seconds passed and nothing happened. He looked at me and half smiled. A minute passed, and nothing happened. We waited until 2 minutes had ticked away, and no spinal fluid leaked out of my nose. Euphoria filled me until my spirit seemed bigger than my body. Suddenly, I became restless. It was time to prepare to go home. Dr. Coldwell appeared almost as excited. For the first time in weeks, his smile stretched across his face, and his eyes shone bright with hope. When Dad arrived, I surprised us both by sitting up in bed, chatting, and surfing the internet on his laptop. This time, I read the blog comments to him. Jodi, you have made me appreciate every warm shower I take, every bite that I eat, and every minute with my girls. Thank you so much for your strength and for helping us all to realize how important these little blessings are in our lives. You're doing great. Hope things keep going in the right direction. Love, Cami Sanders. I read the words and continued to soar. Scanning through the next several notes energized me further. I kept reading. Dad, listen to this one, from Tolan's sister, Mindy. I'd already read it to myself, but I knew he'd love it too. Hello, superhero. How are those brain enhancements coming along? I know you really will be the stronger for all of it. I tried calling your room after the second surgery when I thought things were on the up. I didn't realize they had moved you back to the ICU. A friendly man answered the phone. I couldn't tell from the hello if it was Tolan or your dad. I said, "Hi, this is Mindy." "Hi, Mindy," came back the happy voice. I could tell, though, I didn't know the voice, and he had no idea of who Mindy was. Probably should have chit-chatted with the patient a bit to brighten his day. I look forward to talking with you when you are feeling stronger. Kinley keeps making you things she wants me to mail, mystery-sealed envelopes. I know one of them has some pennies in there she felt the need to give. They might make their way to Riverdale for entertainment. Get home soon. We all love you. Mindy. The encouragement kept coming. I read and laughed and read again. Roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you. Now I'm sure you have heard this next part, but it totally fits you right now, in a funny, make-you-laugh way. But the roses are withered, the violets are all dead. You can't expect them to stay alive after 30 days in the hospital, for heaven's sakes. The sugar is lumpy, and so is your head. I bet you have never had this lumpy of a head before. Isn't that just perfectly fitting right now? Now don't laugh too hard. I would feel awful if what I said caused additional pains. I don't think you are Superwoman anymore. She-Ra is better. She has super fabulous powers and strength. She even has what looks like a big blonde wig, which will kind of be like you after you get extensions. I love you more than my vacuum. Ooh, man, that is a good one. Can you imagine my hideous carpet without my vacuum? Love your guts, Tam. For any non-family member that may read my comments, please know I am not an insensitive random person that says crazy things. I am Jodi's sister, who knows her very well, and they say laughter is the best medicine. All posts are meant in good fun to lighten Jodi's mood and let her know I am here and thinking about her 24/7. Whew, now that is cleared up. The sight of my dad laughing until he cried boosted me even higher. Far more than a village watched and supported me through every up and down. Chapter 27. Resolve. Courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. Maya Angelou. My fingers tapped on my tray when the nurse entered my room. The restlessness overflowed from my body and spilled out onto everything and everyone around me. For 30 days, I lay in my hospital bed, dutifully doing whatever I was told, which often meant doing nothing at all. I endured a burning sodium infusion in the middle of the night, accusations that I was hiding instead of taking my pills, and numerous blown veins and pinpricks at the hands of less experienced staff. Since my diagnosis, I'd felt I could do little to help myself get better. I was dependent on doctors, nurses, specialists, and everyone else to fix me. Obediently, I'd followed every command with military-like precision, too vulnerable not to obey, yet powerless to do anything else. Forcing the feelings of helplessness from my mind, I promised myself to take control. The pneumocephalus and third surgery had changed me. Although still barely able to move, I determined to walk out of hell and into the world on my own 2 feet. No longer a dummy to practice on, I stopped looking to others to tell me what to do. The nurse gazed at my chart, recorded my vitals, and prepared my room for bedtime. Content I didn't need anything else, she prepared to leave. "I'll be back to check on you and get your vitals in 3 or 4 hours. "No," I yelled in my head, but soon found the words coming from my mouth. "No, I don't want anyone coming in during the night anymore. If I am ever going to be strong enough to go home, I need sleep, which I can't get when I'm woken up every few hours." She tilted her head and narrowed her eyes. "If I need anything, I will call you." I punctuated the statement with a definitive head nod. "Okay," she paused. "I'll check with Jamie and make a note for the day shift nurse. Would you please turn off the light as you go?" "Of course," she said as she clicked the switch and exited the room. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and I saw life clearly. Part of me didn't understand why the realization had taken so long. I'd lain for a month, childlike, trusting that everyone else knew what was best for me. I believed if I obeyed and endured, I would get better. 30 days. It took me that long to learn that nobody knows what is happening in my body as well as I do. One size fits all doesn't exist in a hospital any more than in a clothing store. Protocols may protect the patient masses, but I finally realized I had choices and I had to follow my gut. "Hello, Jodi." Grandma Ketchum's familiar voice greeted me before I opened my eyes. My mom's mother and father walked in, straight to my bedside. Grandma's petite frame hadn't changed, even as she aged. Her chin-length mahogany hair still rolled gently and neatly, the same way I remembered it my whole life. Grandpa was grayer and a little heavier than in my youth, but he looked about the same too. I'd seen pictures of him as a young man, nearly an Elvis Presley double, tall and thin with perfect wavy short brown hair. The sight of them filled me with warm memories. "We've wanted to come for weeks, but for a while we couldn't, and then you were so up and down, we were afraid of disturbing you. It's so good to finally see you in person," she said. "Sorry we couldn't visit before." Grandma always apologized, not just to me, but to everyone. Most of the time, I didn't think she had anything to apologize for, but perhaps it had become a habit, an endearing one at that. "Well, how are you, Joe?" Grandpa's voice boomed. "I'm okay. How are you?" "Mean and ornery, about like normal?" Well, I wouldn't expect anything less. I played along. Grandpa's teasing was his signature as much as Grandma's apologizing was hers. They were married in 1951, and in my 33 years, I could hardly remember seeing one of them without the other. Grandma leaned in and inspected my incision scar. "The scar looks good. I think it's healing well." Grandma spoke more to herself than to me, as though she'd conducted a medical exam and simply reported her findings. The nurse came in, and Grandma introduced herself and began bragging about me. "You are lucky to take care of this one. They don't come any better than Jodi." Even with all she's been through in the last month, she's still smiling. Always has been an angel. I laughed and wondered if the nurse thought my new "I'm not taking crap from anyone" attitude made me saintly. Grandma and Grandpa visited with me until the sun hid behind the mountains. "We better get going. Neither Grandpa nor I like to drive on the freeway in the dark." "Oh, Mona, I'm fine driving," Grandpa piped in, one of his few moments in the conversation. "Yes, but you don't see as well as you used to, and it's getting late." Their back-and-forth banter was another endearing feature. "Well, I guess we gotta go, Miss Jodi," he said. "I want you to know that I love you, and I'm praying for you." Grandpa choked out the words. "You are my hero." He reached his big arms around me and hugged me tightly. "We'll see you again soon." "Love you too, Grandpa." "I know you do." Grandma nudged him out of the way and took her turn. "I just can't believe all you've been through, but I really think the worst is over. You're going to get better now. Mark and Darlene, Doug and his family, David and Teresa, they all send their love. Tova and Danny are following the blog, and we are going to have a big family party to celebrate when you get out of here." She hugged me and kissed my forehead. "It's a deal," I agreed. "Love you. Thanks for coming." The room quieted after they left, but I could hear Grandma's voice all the way down the hall. Only after they exited the big double doors did the unit go silent again. As soon as you are strong enough, you can go home. Dr. Shelton stood taller, his grin broader than I'd seen in weeks. 5 days after my third brain surgery, the doctors were confident that my spinal fluid leak had finally sealed. After multiple false hopes, the possibility of healing and home were motivating and humbling. The nurse checked in after the evening shift change. She was new to me. "Hi, hon. I'm Shauna, and I'll be taking care of you this evening. I know the neuro unit can be intimidating, but don't you worry about a thing, darling. I'll be right here." Shauna walked around my room and checked everything. She tucked the covers neatly under my legs, straightened the books on the table, threw away cracker wrappers from lunch, and closed the drawer of the TV stand. Her mannerisms reminded me of a nanny instead of a nurse. "Chart says you've been here quite a while. I bet with a little more work, we can get you ready to go home." She sang the words in a childlike tune. The nurse hummed and danced in place as she checked my vitals. She was probably a very competent caregiver who doubled as a great 80s music night dance buddy. But at that moment, I needed a coach, not a cheerleader. After she left, I called the nurse manager's station. Jamie answered. "Jamie, this is Jodi Brown. I'd like a different nurse. Shauna and I just aren't in sync tonight." "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Yes, she seems like a nice person, but I'm so close. I just need someone else." "Okay, I'm glad you let me know. Give me a few minutes and I'll switch the schedule. If you need anything else, please tell me," he said. "Will do. And Jamie, thanks." "No problem." Satisfied with myself, I ate another cracker and left the wrapper on my bedside table. Regaining control tested me. I determined to fight with everything in me, but the scale read 91 pounds. My body resembled a photocopy of myself, one that had been shrunk to 80% the size of the original. I'd lost over 20 pounds in 8 weeks. Even with my focus on family and home, the reality of near constant vomiting, persistent headaches, dizzy spells, and weakness convinced me I was still a very sick person. My sluggish feet shuffled over the floor as I tried to walk. My sister said I reminded her of our 91-year-old grandma before she died. The muscles in my body had atrophied during the weeks in bed. The therapist came to my room with increased frequency and renewed attention. Several times each day, I practiced walking the halls, doing a couple of loops at a time to increase my strength. Forcing myself up and down, even a few stairs, required all my physical and mental energy. "The more you practice, the easier it will become," chided the physical therapist. I could have given the same speech to Lindy, sitting at the piano. The theory behind the therapy, muscles only strengthen when stretched, encouraged me to push myself. After so much idleness, the activity was exhausting. I thought if the physical therapist didn't leave me alone for a while, I'd never rest enough to walk on my own. And the walks and stair exercises triggered headaches and more time in bed. But I convinced myself I needed to be home to really get better. By the end of the week, we kicked my recovery into high gear. I pictured every exercise as taking me one step closer to home. I forced myself to eat small portions of food. Every time the physical therapist came in, I worked harder than the last time and pushed myself to regain some strength. In between meals and therapies, I rested as much as possible. Tolan and Dad were my best therapists, escorting me around the neuro unit over and over again. Friday, a resident came in to remove my lumbar drain. I feared the needle had taken residence in my back. Akin to pulling out stitches, the 6-inch spike prickled my spine as he pulled it out. Without it, I could recline on my back again, a tiny victory on the road to freedom. By Sunday night, exactly 1 week from my near-death experience, the doctor said if all checked out, I could be released in the morning. After half a dozen false starts, I dared not get my expectations too high, but the anticipation bubbled inside me. Maybe this is really the last night. Dad posted it on the blog, again. He and Tolan had both announced it before, but perhaps the time had come. Comments flooded the blog post. Dad's excitement grew as he read each one aloud. "Here's one from Cousin Nikki," Dad said. "Nicole," my mom corrected. She goes by Nicole most of the time now. What? Dad laughed out loud. I supposed it had nothing to do with the name, but more to do with the fact that the tone in our conversations had taken a drastic, upward turn. All right then, here is a comment from Nikki, or Nicole, Giles, he chuckled. Holy cow, you look great. After all your surgeries and complications, I am shocked to see you looking so good. This is a true testament to your inner strength. How good it must feel to be able to cuddle with your honey. Keep going, keep moving, and when you're in pain, remember that moments like that make everything worth it. Quote of the day. Anyone can give up. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. But to hold it together when everyone else would understand if you fell apart, that's true strength. Sometimes I think it would be easier to fall apart, I stated flatly. But then you guys would have to pick up all the pieces again. Mom and Dad both chuckled. I smiled and then got serious. You know, I haven't really been close to Nicole, for several years now, not since high school. Even then, she was always closer to Chrissy. But she came to see me a couple of times. So did Deanne and Steve. I don't think I could ever make them understand how much it means to me. Well, more proof of a great family. Here's a note from the Orgill side of the family, Dad said, emphasizing the difference in the way the East Coast Orgills and the Midwestern Orgills pronounced our names. Dustin says he is sure the reason you are getting better is because of the chocolate-covered cherries he brought. He'll bring you more, now or later, if you want them. Mom piped up. Chocolate-covered cherries? I'd have tried those if I'd known you had them. I just smiled. Dad continued. Oh, I talked to your Uncle F yesterday. He and Lois wanted to visit, but we told everyone to let you rest, just to make sure you're ready to go home. Brad wanted to come too, but we told him the same thing. They send their love and they say they are anxious to see you again, at home and healthy. He stopped talking for a moment, and my mind marveled at the beauty of family and unconditional love. Dad finished up with one last comment. Way to go, Jodi. Keep it up. I am so happy to see you feeling better. Maybe tomorrow will be the day you can finally be homeward bound. I hope so. Know that you continue to be in my thoughts and prayers. Love ya, Kelly Flint. When he read the words, homeward bound, Dad's crow's feet appeared above a contented but exhausted smile. Hey, did you ever finish up all the strawberries and cookies that Kelly brought you? I could use a big chocolate chip cookie right about now, he said. I think we all could, Mom agreed. We were all catching the fever, not the rising temperature, but the actual, real possibility that home was close. Chapter 28. Homeward Bound. Smile, breathe, and go slowly. Thich Nhat Hanh. June 15th, 2009. After the IV came out, I looked down and realized for the first time in 35 days, I wasn't tethered to anything. Not a single needle or tube strung from my body. How does that feel? The nurse asked. Like freedom, I responded. Dad arrived and took my arm as we slowly walked around the neuro unit for the last time. We stopped at a bulletin board that featured the names and photos of all the nurses and CNAs on the floor. I recognized nearly all of them. Some I considered guardians, and others I called friends. Dad snapped pictures so I'd always remember them, the ones who'd healed me with their compassionate care, and the few who taught me painfully how a person should never be treated. Though Dad sat near me for most of my hospital days, that morning he stayed for just a short time. He carefully escorted me back to my room, took a final photo, and then he left the hospital for good. He drove to my house and with my mother prepared for the homecoming. I baby-stepped to the bathroom. There I sat on a stool for my first unaided shower in a month. I'd been exposed in every sense of the word. My body, mind, and soul, bare. I pulled the curtain closed around me and cherished the hot water flowing from my shoulders to my toes. The deep red polish wasn't even cracked. Like me, it had miraculously been preserved. I am still me. The bag in the closet contained traces of my old life. My clothes seemed 100 years old, but still a welcome change from indiscreet, ugly hospital gowns. Even my old wardrobe restored a part of my new freedom. No nurses or CNAs entered my room. Perhaps I'd already been taken off their duties. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I tapped my feet and drummed my hands on my legs in rhythm. Not to the beat of music, but as an exit from my nerves. My bags rested next to me in the spot where I normally did. The jet setter was ready to leave. Tolan walked in a short time later and found me still on the bed's edge. He scooted the bags and sat, and then put his arms around me. "You ready?" His question encompassed 1,000 others. "Absolutely," I replied. The checkout nurse entered, and we began the long process of leaving the hospital. We signed release papers, and she loaded him up with instructions, medications, emergency phone numbers, and bags of supplies and ointments. Tolan filled cart after cart of gifts, but I stopped him from taking the flowers. I asked the nurse to find the flowers new homes in the neuro unit. She agreed. The transfer girl brought a wheelchair, and I seated myself for my final ride. Tolan ran ahead of us to get the car. No doctors or nurses escorted us out. The proud part of me wanted to cheer as I left, but there was no one to share in my triumph. They had rightfully moved on to the next patient. None of the people we passed seemed to notice. The moment was anticlimactic. I was victorious, but alone and apprehensive at the same time. After all it had taken to get out of the hospital, I thought I'd leave as a conquering hero. The wheelchair stopped in front of the building. Tolan pulled up and carefully helped me into the car, ready to drive home from the hospital, this time with his wife by his side. Tolan drove slower, more cautiously than normal. Since he secretly believed himself to be a race car driver, I appreciated his restraint. He reached over and gave me an eye patch to protect my bad eye from the sunlight streaming through the window. Knowing my increased distaste for hospital food, he pulled up to a Greek restaurant drive-thru and ordered me an gyro for the ride home. I ate and dripped cucumber sauce from my mouth for half the commute. Nearly an hour later, the car slowed for the turn into our neighborhood. My heart leapt with delight at the sight of huge welcome home banners along the road. One sign hung from and nearly covered an enormous tractor. As I choked up and smiled, wonderful shouts of, "Welcome home, Jodi!" echoed from Belinda and her family, my Jamba Juice friends, waving wildly on the corner lot. We rounded the final turn and I caught a glimpse of our home. Posters, signs, ribbons, and balloons decorated the house and yard, and dozens of cheering, arm-waving family members and friends awaited on the lawn. As I opened the car door, my sister Tammy helped me out and then placed her arm behind my back, a strong support that literally protected me and kept me on my feet. My young children reached me as soon as I was up. They surrounded me and wrapped themselves around my neck, arms, and legs. I am home. Trendon released me from the embrace, but his eyes stayed on me for hours. Lindy abandoned her normal, guarded touch and hugged me repeatedly. Then she trailed me, never more than a few feet from my side. When Kaysen had me all to himself, my tough guy squeezed me with a pop-your-head-off hug, my favorite kind. Little Davin threw his arms around my neck, then pulled back the elastic on my eye patch and plucked the patch off my face. He stretched the cord and placed it over his eye. A perfect homecoming. A grand welcome wagon met my every step. One by one, the young women, who'd fasted and prayed for me, greeted me with open arms and toothy smiles. Emily and Lisa hugged me, as they had in the hospital weeks before. Tears of joy, not worry, streamed from our eyes. I scanned the yard and realized every face I saw meant the world to me. They'd been my neighbors and friends for years, but suddenly, they were more than that. They were my champions. I walked amongst the crowd and hugged each person who welcomed me home. "It's good to have you home," Mom said as we finally entered the house. I realized my home had been her home for several months too. She was the mother to my children in my absence. She saw them off on their last day of school and kept them busy during their first weeks of summer vacation. She knew their schedules, favorite meals, and stories, and she carried the weight of keeping my little ones happy and occupied to ease the separation. 6 days. I thought I'd be gone 6 days. So much had changed since I'd walked out of the house. Dad was crying before the words came out of his mouth. Love you, Joe. He didn't need to say more. I knew. He'd shown me every day for 28 days. His strong arms engulfed me, and we stood together and cried. My sister Christy called from Hawaii, and we celebrated with tears. She'd wanted to come. The hospital stay had been hard on her, too, thousands of miles away, unable to do anything to help. Her wonderful and kind offers lingered, but our house was full, and we didn't even know yet what we needed. The time would come for us to embrace and reunite, but that day would have to wait. When the hubbub quieted, my family circled together in the backyard and continued the celebration. A few miles west of my home lays the Ogden Airport. On calm days with mild winds, a familiar sound reverberates in the sky. In ideal conditions, the sound repeats every 30 minutes, to the point where I know it by heart. The whir and hum of the engine plays like a soundtrack above the town. Minutes after the small, cloud-white plane soars out of sight, another sound whooshes into the air. Parachutes and their passengers fall silently, at least from ground-level perspective, that is, until a focused flyer yanks a cord and transforms a giant, pocketed handkerchief into a fabric life preserver. When the first chute opens, I always gaze skyward to watch up to a dozen ants falling to the earth. One by one, the distinct whistle gives way to a colorful burst that first hangs and then floats to the ground. When the new view of life overtakes a soul, an occasional exuberant voice bursts in the air. Woo-hoo! Home at last. Fluffy cumulus clouds blanketed the sky above me, and all I wanted to do was shout for the world to hear. The excitement died down, and the adrenaline high wore off. Tammy helped me inside, and I curled up on the couch. Tolan, who'd stood quietly close by and observed the day, crawled behind me and fitted himself perfectly along my form. Dad covered us with a blanket and took a picture of us as we slept, together again, at home. Chapter 29. Still Enough. Arise. You will arrive as you are. Jodi Brown. June 21st, 2009. Familiar voices and laugh tracks from the TV made their way into my in-laws' front room. The take-charge wife ordered her sidekick husband around and scoffed at his meager attempts to make dinner and care for the kids. She showed the muscle. He provided comic relief. I'd always laughed at the show, but at that moment, I was struck with gratitude for all the real men around me. Men who were strong and brave, and loving and tender. Father's Day presented an opportunity to thank my heroes. My dad had already left. A few days after my release, he'd flown home to Hawaii to resume his own life. I tried to tell him just how his presence helped save me, but I didn't know if he could really understand. With Dad gone, my plans were to celebrate the day quietly with Tolan, Larry, and Grandpa Pringle. Sunday afternoon, we encircled the dining room, ate, and exchanged gifts. I didn't have presents for the amazing men in my life, only love. It's 101.8, Mom announced as she read the thermometer. Oh, Joe, I wish I could make it all go away. Stay in bed and I'll bring you a little soup. I sank into my memory foam mattress and wondered when life would get back to normal. In the hospital, a little nurse call button resided on every bed, and when I pressed that little button, a rescuer came to my room with relief. A little something in my IV, or a few more pills to ease the suffering. Mom came and went more often than any nurse, but no magic pill or medication flowed in my veins to make it better. Friends visited and brought meals and gifts daily. My condition on homecoming day fooled many into thinking I was better. My good friend from the Philippines brought home-cooked platters of food that resembled art more than meals. She carried in the last dish, filled to the brim with a variety of fruit and a heavy cream sauce. "We have to fatten you up, girlfriend," the nurse said. "You were too skinny before you got sick, but now there's nothing left of you. This should help." After she left, we dished all the plates full, and food still covered the platters. The kids, who already liked Veneur's cooking, devoured the meal. I picked at the food, but couldn't get past the disappointment and mess of eating. The flavors I once loved stung my tongue. The sweet cream, fruit, and rich meat tasted eerily similar, earthy, like strong mineral supplements. From then on, Mom introduced foods, one at a time, in small portions. The infantile process discouraged both of us. A cup of yogurt held no more appeal than a piece of fish, a carrot, or an apple. Paralyzed taste buds ruined them all. "I'd always thought it would be fun to have to gain weight," Mom said after another unsuccessful meal attempt. "But not this way." "No, this isn't quite how I imagined mealtime either," I admitted. Even the tiniest taste of greasy food sent me into the bathroom with stomach convulsions. It was as if my system had forgotten how to digest food. The pleasure and sociality of eating turned into a task. As much as I hated IVs, they were a convenient alternative to eating. Mom's shoulders dropped and she sat down next to me on the backyard lounger. "We'll just have to take smaller baby steps." During all the waiting, surgeries, medications, and tests in the hospital, I thought I would be well by the time I was released. Dreaded bath time in the hospital proved just as challenging at home. I climbed in on my own, but bathing myself proved more than I could manage. Mom stayed outside the door and came in when I needed her. She always cared for me with a tender touch, but some things I longed to do on my own. "Lean your head back and I'll rinse your hair." I obeyed, but kept one hand covering my eye. Afterwards, she handed me a towel and lifted me to my feet. The process had taken 50 minutes and all of my energy. I lay near the edge while she dried my hair. Then I rolled over and went back to sleep at 10:30 in the morning. The spinning and drilling in my head didn't stop when I left the hospital. Sleep seemed to be the only way to power through. But my kids had waited over a month for me to come home and be Mom again. "Let's watch a show," Kaysen said as he crawled next to me on the bed. "Okay, you choose." I propped my pillow and sat up. He sorted through the stack of DVDs, looking at the picture on each cover. He ran his fingers across the words. Though he couldn't read yet, he knew every title. "Star Wars Episode 1, he announced. No surprise. The familiar da-da-da-da-dum melody played, effectively luring other Star Wars fans into the room. The music alerted Lindy that I was awake, and she took residence next to me. Never a talkative little girl, she'd seemed especially quiet since I'd been home. Her little shadow followed me everywhere I went. I disappeared from her life, but when I returned, she didn't let me out of her sight for long. Davin wandered in next. He climbed onto the cedar chest and then ambled onto the bed. He didn't seem the least bit upset that both of Mommy's sides were already taken. He simply toddled across the bed and plopped into my lap. Trendon appeared after the movie started. On the screen, young Anakin Skywalker fiddled with tools, trying to fix a droid. He reminded me a lot of Trendon, who was good with his hands and tools. Trendon scanned the room and sat to my right, next to Kaysen on the outside of the mattress. The unplanned movie day injected me with endorphins more powerful than any medication. No matter all the things I couldn't do, my children just wanted to be with me. To them, even if I was broken, I was still enough. Hospital visits and doctor's appointments still ruled the calendar. Mom stayed with the kids, so my father-in-law, Larry, volunteered to be my driver. In only a few weeks, he'd already proven a faithful chauffeur and companion. He asked just the right questions, which indicated he listened intently to the doctors and me. That morning, we drove to the eye center where Tolan would meet us for an appointment with my newest doctor, an oculoplastic surgeon. My dry, scratched, film-covered eye needed a solution. Mom had made a series of small bean bags to weigh down my eyelid so we could tape it closed. Every time she came for a hospital visit, she delivered a new version. Beanbag 1.0 lacked the weight to do the trick. Version 2.0 was heavier, but too large. Version 3.0 settled on my eyelid and did a decent job of shutting the eye. That didn't stop her from perfecting her invention with 2 more varieties. Weighted with rice and pennies, her tiny creations brought needed relief, but they acted as only temporary solutions. Dr. Shelton sent us to Dr. Kim, a specialist who could implant a gold weight into my eyelid to help it close. The process is fairly simple. The eye is measured and the weight is curved to match the shape. The gold piece is surgically inserted into the middle of the lid to provide maximum closure and protection. Dr. Kim's confident tone assured me and made me wonder how long he had been practicing. His youthful dark hair, skin, and Asian ancestry hid his age well, but I suspected he neared my age. Right now, your cheek is drooping so much your eye is at risk, not just from the lack of closure, but from the lack of pressure, holding your eyeball in place. During the procedure, I will need to suture the outside corner and insert a collagen implant under your eye to hold everything together. This will also tighten the right side. His explanation made sense and gave me hope. Do you have any questions for me? Tolan turned to me, then back to the doctor. What are the possible side effects? Larry, Tolan, and I knew the reason behind the question. After 35 days of the worst possible side effects, we learned it was better to prepare ourselves. Allergic reactions to the implants or sutures are the most common. The gold doesn't usually cause a problem, but the other materials can. Anesthesia is the biggest risk, but it looks like Jodi has had plenty of experience with that. Of course, there will be some bruising, swelling, and recovery time, but in comparison to brain surgery, this should be easy. He brushed his fingers through the long hair near his face. Habit or uncertainty? He said all the right things, and we hoped his estimation proved true. A nurse gave us the surgery packet and scheduled the procedure for 2 days later. After the 3 previous experiences, I decided the required 12-hour fast in preparation for surgery was a good idea. Less to throw up before and after. But with the procedure late in the afternoon, my stomach ached and I wanted to fill the hole in my belly. I think I'm almost as nervous now as I was for brain surgery, I admitted to Tolan. Now I know I'm susceptible to side effects. Let's hope not this time. The clock hands couldn't move fast enough for me. Anxiety made me nearly burst out of my body. The OR nurse appeared at last. Everything will be okay. Tolan rubbed my arm and kissed me on the way to the OR. The anesthesiologist introduced himself and prepped me. I'm going to take good care of you, but you won't be completely out. Dr. Kim wants you awake so he can get a proper fitting with the weight. You can't just knock me out and wake me when it's over? He chuckled, but I was serious. No, but you will be heavily sedated, so you won't feel anything. Okay, let's get this over with. He poked the needle into my arm, and the familiar tingling spread through my body until my mind slipped into oblivion. The anesthesiologist nailed it. Though I was technically awake, the sedation didn't really wear off until the next morning. Hey, sweetie, I have to leave for work soon. I'm glad you woke up so I can see how you're doing, Tolan said. Let's take a look at your eye. I sat up and wiped the sleepies out of my good eye and turned to him. He put his hand under my chin and tipped my head toward the light. It looks pretty good. Do you remember anything the doctor said last night? Nope. Well, we knew you had lost weight, but apparently you surprised Dr. Kim because your eyeball and eyelid don't even touch. He said that is very unusual and happens when people lose a lot of weight under extreme circumstances. Of course, we know that is the case with you. You don't say. My skeletal arms and legs proved that. He said your eyes are very sunken in, and so even with the surgery, the lids don't close all the way. He hopes that when you put on weight, your eyes will close from corner to corner. Normally, the gold bar is not visible, but the doctor said it may be on you, at least for a while. We won't really know until the swelling goes down. So you're an expert on gold weights now too, huh? Brain tumors, craniotomies, gold bars, I pretty much know it all, he said. Your mom is here and we'll be in to check on you soon. She already fed the kids. I waited around to see you, but now I gotta run. Hey, I don't want to break you in half, so try to eat a little today and put a little meat on those bones. I agreed and he walked out the door. Another recovery had begun. "You are not going to girls' camp," Randy stated. "Yes, I am," I insisted. "Jodi, I don't think it's a good idea. You just had surgery on your eye and you haven't even recovered from your hospital stay yet. It is too much for you right now. Please, my friend, don't be so stubborn on this one." My church leader and friend was pressuring me in every way he could think of. But I couldn't not go. The girls and I had planned camp together. We needed to be there together. I pursed my lips as best I could and stared at Randy. "You're gonna do it anyways, aren't you?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yes, Randy, I will be fine. I need to be with the girls." I gave him my answer, and it was definitive. He let out a long sigh. "Okay, well, maybe you can go up with Janine." After all his arguing against it, he volunteered his wife to take me to camp. Between his arguments and Tolan's concerns, I finally compromised and agreed to stay only a few hours. I'd have dinner at camp with the girls, visit, and return home. Janine picked me up right on time, and we arrived at the campsite an hour later. Lisa and Emily were the first to reach the car. Emily opened my door, and both girls beamed as they leaned in to greet me. They'd worn those smiles when they sat by my bedside in the hospital, and when they'd hugged me at my homecoming. Emily gently took my right arm and lifted me out of the car. Lisa held fast to my left arm, and together they escorted me to the campground. The uneven and rocky path caught my feet, and I stumbled forward until nearly the full weight of my body was carried down the trail by the two 17-year-old girls. I righted myself just as we got to the campsite, nestled neatly amongst hundreds of towering trees and protective bushes. The fire pit sat in the center of camp, surrounded by picnic tables and camp chairs bearing identifying t-shirts and water bottles. The girls accompanied me to a chair, and I seated myself for the evening. The excited whispers spread quickly and filled the air with a tangible hum. Tent doors unzipped and dusty teenagers emerged. High-pitched squeals preceded a hurried gathering to my chair. One by one, all the girls who promised to fast, pray, and make a miracle for me embraced me and welcomed me to camp. We had come full circle, and they, indeed, participated in the miracle. I ate dinner off a plastic tray, surrounded by lovely, chattering girls and watchful, kind leaders. "Tell me about the end of school," I invited. One of the older girls took the lead and started a nonstop, one-way conversation focused in my direction. I sat back against the nylon chair, grinned, and then nodded so she knew I was following along. In moments, a chorus of footsteps and voices broke the conversation around the fire pit. I turned my head and saw a group of ladies enter our camp, and soon several good friends encircled me, tears streaming down their smiling faces. Though only 2 months had passed since I'd seen them, we all looked at each other with newfound appreciation for friendships and life. A lump formed in my throat. I couldn't say anything. All I did was embrace them and cry. Chapter 30. Rude Awakening. Treat everyone with politeness, even those who are rude to you, not because they are nice, but because you are. Unknown. July 2009. What the? The stranger's words didn't give anything away that his actions hadn't already shown. It was my first trip out in public. We needed supplies for my eye, so Mom and I ventured to a drugstore. I clutched the cart to steady myself as we walked in. A young man, probably in his early 20s, strode out. He looked up just as he passed, did a double take, and then turned to stare. His face told me all that I needed to know. Nothing had prepared me for the reaction of foreign faces. The glares, mothers hushing inquisitive children, the rude laughter, and offensive gestures. These strangers stared, but they never saw me. The days dawdled, but the weeks fled. My life, it seemed, could not be predicted. Sleep is critical for the brain to recover from trauma. Plan to sleep 9 to 11 hours each night for the first 2 to 4 years of recovery. I read the recommendation in a book about brain trauma. The advice sounded ridiculous, but personal experience testified it was true. Sleep ruled my nights and often my days. Tasks that should have taken an hour, fixing a meal or doing a load of laundry, took an entire day. Several times a week, Mom and I walked at the park so I could regain strength. Eating, drinking, walking, and talking all required enormous focus. The difficulty of establishing a new schedule surpassed expectations. Yet each day I found myself anxious to get back to life. Mom cared for the kids and house, often while I rested and watched. But the more I watched, the more restless I grew. Despite her selfless, loving actions, I obsessed over one thought. I should be doing this for myself. Mom sensed it too, as if we'd been transported back in time to the semester I got married. I had moved home for a few months before the wedding, but tension tugged at us. Proof it was time to be on my own again. We set a date for Mom's departure and counted down the days. "You gonna be okay on your own, Joe?" Mom asked. "I don't know. I look at everything you are doing, and I know I can't do it all. But I also know I can't lay around and watch you do it, either." She nodded. "Just don't overdo it. You don't need to serve gourmet meals or keep a spotless house. You need to let some things go, and that's okay." I'd heard the speech before, but she was absolutely right. In my before life, I'd been a perfectionist. If I was going to survive my afterlife, slow, steady, and good enough would have to become my mottos. Her July departure date arrived before we were ready. Mom was not only family, she had become part of the neighborhood and church congregation. Friends wrote her notes and cards for our bittersweet farewell celebration. "Trendon, you keep being your mom's right-hand man," she said as she hugged him goodbye. He nodded and agreed. She turned to Lindy. "Next time I come for a visit, we'll finish making that outfit for you, Miss Lindy Lou. You're going to be a big helper to your mom too, right?" "Uh-huh," came Lindy's reply. "Be Grandma's best boy, Kaysen," she whispered in his ear. He gave her a thumbs-up sign. She scooped David in her arms and buried her head in his little neck. "Be a good boy for Mama, little D." When it was my turn, she looked right at me. "Love you, Joe. Take care of yourself. Let the kids help and don't do too much. Annette, Cammie, and Heidi said they'll help, so call them if you need anything. Remember, it can all wait." She'd said it before, but we both needed to hear it one last time. Thoughts swirled in my mind, but I couldn't put them together when I tried to speak. "Thank you, Mom, for taking care of my family and me, for everything. I love you." My words seemed inadequate at best. We all escorted Grandma Oreo to her car. With the last bag tucked in the trunk, we exchanged a final hug, and she got in. She waved, and the kids waved wildly back at her, chasing the car as she drove down the street. It was an end, but also a beginning. We left on vacation to the family cabin in Montana soon after Mom left our home. For a few days, time slowed. The couch by the picture window in the living room doubled as my reading nook and nap spot. Lounging on the wooden dock overlooking my favorite lake, I soaked in the sun, the breeze, and the wonderful sounds of life. I listened to the kids splash on the shore, the buzz of the motorboat, waves gently lapping against the sand, birds singing in the trees, insects zooming over the water, and the wispy wind whistling in the background, the soundtrack for life at the cabin. In the perfect little mountain hideaway, I was safe from the world. The week in the woods conjured up old memories and new thoughts. I came to some tenuous conclusions. Survivor is a duplicitous word. For outsiders, the word means conqueror and victor. For those that share the title, it means something else altogether. For some, it means death knocked on their door, and they answered with a fight. For me, the battle had already dragged on, and I accepted what those around me had not. Death was not a bad option. If you have lived a good life, the hardest part in accepting death lies in knowing that those you love don't want you to die. They will be the ones to suffer when the sufferer finds relief. Living can be a difficult state of life. You are so much more than a brain tumor survivor, the woman at church said. I'd already heard that speech. People told me not to let my tumor define me, and then they described me as the very thing they claimed didn't define me. Day after day, I tried not to be just a brain tumor survivor, but sometimes no amount of disguising could hide the truth. When my body hit a wall, my face drooped, my mouth dripped, and dizzy spells knocked me off balance, I became one thing, a brain tumor survivor. People looked at me differently, with a combination of respect and sorrow. Before our trip to the cabin, I ran into an old friend and caught her up on my new life. It must be so hard, she said. You've endured so much, but I don't know how you face each day when your body doesn't cooperate. I couldn't do it. I stumbled through the conversation and formed a better reply. My body may be imperfect, but my life doesn't have to be. I can sulk, or I can find glory in the beautiful mess. I can survive, or I can live, and living is better than surviving any day. The escape to the mountains cleansed my soul. I'd started a new job just weeks before my diagnosis. Management wasn't required to hold my position, but they did. Fundraising allowed for flexible hours, and I already knew I could do much of the work at home. Still, the time for my return approached faster than expected, or maybe my recovery was slower than expected. The return date on the calendar became my goal, a place and purpose for me to venture back into the world. I rejoiced in the time to adjust before the big day. The end of the summer signaled the start of the school year, and my afterlife. When the alarm buzzed on the first day of school, I couldn't snooze. The outfits were laid out, and the backpacks packed, and lunches stood by in the fridge. School forced me back on duty. With the big kids off to school, I re-entered the world, often with the little boys by my side. Surrounded by them, I felt braver than going it alone. One September day, the three of us sat in a restaurant eating lunch. I turned when I heard raucous laughter. 3 construction workers in orange vests dined together, their arms and faces tanned and dirty. They pointed at me and imitated the food falling from my mouth as I struggled to eat. I froze, and my appetite left. I gathered the boys and fled the restaurant. "Why are we leaving? I didn't even finish my taco," Kaysen asked as we hurried off. I had no idea what to tell my young son. In the car, I banged the steering wheel with my hands, and then caught sight of the men, still laughing and watching through the window. My pulse raced faster than the car as we sped away. "You okay, Mom?" Kaysen asked. Through the rearview mirror, I saw his eyes widen and his forehead wrinkle. If he'd been a few years older, if he'd understood, he would have protected me. But at 4, he was unaware of the incident that had just occurred. Simple cries turned to heaves, and I glanced at him again. "I'm not feeling so well, buddy. It's time for preschool, so I'm going to drop you off and go home to rest." "Good idea. You'll feel better if you rest," came his wise advice. I nodded, glad his years blinded him from knowing how cruel the world could be. Throughout the day, I replayed the restaurant scenario 100 times. Only then did I think of possible replies. "Real mature, boys," topped the list as the kindest response. In some mental reruns, I broke into a full-fledged survivor story, shaming them and walking away victorious. But every recreation of the day's events ended with me remembering what really happened, and vowing there would be no repeat. A few weeks later, Annette took Daven and me to lunch. Our boys ate chicken and fries and played with toys while we visited. I still wore my patch to protect and moisten my eye, and used napkins to cover my mouth as I ate, just in case. Pieces of food fell on the trough between my teeth and my cheek, but I was careful not to drop any food from my mouth. The boys played and emptied their milkshakes as we conversed. An older gentleman with dirty gray hair and an unshaven face approached. Annette's back was to him, but I faced him, so I smiled as he neared. That's when he stopped, right across from me. "Why are you wearing your Halloween costume so early in the season?" Annette's eyes bulged and she turned to face the man. I studied him, but couldn't discern if he was mentally unstable or just a jerk. A disgusted cough preceded my reply. "It's not a costume. I wear this face all the time. Excuse me while we finish." I turned and the stranger sauntered away. "Is he for real?" Annette blurted. "I can't believe that. You told me, but I just didn't think people were really like that. I had no idea. I am so sorry, Jodi." My eyes stayed dry. His words stung, but I finished lunch with my friend. She wanted to punch him, and I wanted to scream, but we didn't reward him with another look. That night, I told Tolan the story. His face tightened, and he shook his head as I vented my frustrations. Then we brainstormed a dozen comebacks, just in case of a next time. No matter how many zingers we devised, I wondered if it really mattered. Some people choose not to see beyond the physical body. They judge based on the cover and not the content. That day, I mourned for all they were missing. Chapter 31. Facing Reality. We must let go of the life we have planned, so as to accept the one that is waiting for us. Joseph Campbell. September 2009. Long blonde locks parted to form the world's largest comb-over. The woman in the mirror caricatured me with distorted, droopy, out of proportion, but familiar features. No matter the angle, the obvious stared back. I was changed. Each day I better grasped the precious reality of life and my time on Earth. The neurosurgeons had meticulously excavated my tumor, carving out the invading lump while trying to protect delicate brain tissue and nerves. The mass was gone, but the facial paralysis, side effects, and scars remained, reminders of my second chance at life. Facial paralysis prevents movements of more than 40 muscles innervated by the facial nerves. I learned chewing is more of a choreographed dance than a modest up and down movement. The eyelids don't just blink, they protect the eye and squeegee the fluid off, forcing it down a drain. Kissing, sipping, smiling, eating, and retaining fluids are complex processes. Without working muscles, these functions stop. Grade 6 paralysis meant total immobility of the entire right side of my face. In my before life, I sometimes wondered what it would feel like to be paralyzed, but I didn't actually want to find out. It's odd, but paralysis doesn't feel like anything. No matter how much I thought about moving my face, no matter how many signals I sent, nothing happened. The nerves did not relay my messages. For years, I worked with my girls at church, teaching them their inherent value has nothing to do with fashion model looks. Integrity, goodness, charity, and compassion trump any physical trait. My afterlife tested my beliefs in a whole new way. I tried to smile over and over again, but the harder I tried, the more distorted I appeared. One half of my face buoyant and cheerful, the other half droopy and misshapen. The only way to appear normal was not to smile, to hold my lips close, but not touching. Tilting and turning my head side to side, I examined the invisible mask I wore. It looked more normal, but not like me. I could deal with the patch or surgery, but I didn't know if I could face the world without my smile. A therapist explained that mixed emotions are normal. Accepting facial paralysis is like grieving for a loved one. You have to mourn the life that is over while being grateful for the life that continues, she said. Your face is the most personal part of who you are. It is the only uniform you wear every day. Your face is the way you tell someone how you feel without saying anything. You are perfectly normal for missing your old life. It's okay to lament what you've lost. Her advice stung with truth. I didn't ask for a new life. yet I was grateful at the same time. The hospital had been my bubble. Friendly faces greeted me daily. Even Tyson, the phlebotomist, rooted for me. They didn't laugh at me, point, stare, or whisper. The isolation from the world had convinced me I wasn't that different. Everything would be okay. The therapist's words also convinced me I needed to mourn my past to embrace my future. Being a pirate suited Jack Sparrow, Elizabeth Swann, and Will Turner, so I supposed it was good enough for me. The itch and irritation to my eye was constant. The weight helped, but didn't allow full closure as I'd hoped. Most days, I opted to be a pirate. Donning the pirate patch broadcast my face to the public. Even if they didn't say anything, they saw and wondered. But unlike a practiced pirate, I felt vulnerable with every step. My feet moved slower, and I tried to surround myself with a layer of protection. But at times, even those protecting me got hurt. "Oh!" Lindy exclaimed as she jumped back. I looked over and saw that I'd hit her in the face, again. Never on purpose, the occurrence was still too frequent. Without peripheral vision and depth perception in my right eye, I constantly missed my targets and hit the unsuspecting. Sadly, Lindy often took the brunt of my inaccuracy. Tears dripped from my eye. "I'm so sorry, honey." A bloody cut marked the 4th time that my fingernail had scratched her when I had been trying to reach past her. "It's okay, Mom. I'm fine. I know you didn't mean to do it." She spoke without hesitation. Despite the streak of blood across her head, her face reassured me, but my cheeks burned with frustration and sorrow. A few days later, the phone rang. The caller ID indicated it was my friend, Stacy. She had saved me once, months before, and our relationship strengthened more with each interaction. She was the one who had figured out I had a spinal fluid leak after my initial hospital stay. "Hey, how are things going?" she asked. It surprised me to hear so much happiness in her voice, despite all she'd experienced in the previous few years. After being married to her best friend for 10 years, she'd lost her husband to suicide. She told me that when she found him, her first horrified thought had been, "He finally did it." I admired how she picked up the pieces of her life, rearranged them, and put together a new, beautiful puzzle. She made a new life for herself because she didn't give in to sorrow, doubt, or consequences of his actions. She did not become a victim. She became a giant. Many would have crawled under a rock. Stacy started lifting the rocks instead, moving the huge boulders out of the way and making a new path for herself and her kids. My mind clicked to the present and Stacy's voice on the other end of the phone. "Oh, I'm okay, I guess," I stuttered. "Liar, you are not. It sucks, doesn't it?" Chuckling a little from her directness, I replied, "Yes, sometimes." We related to each other in a new way we never could before. Where there had been neighborly kindness, a new connection had grown. Friendship beyond words and gestures. At the heart of all of it was pain. She knew pain, knew how to relate to others, and knew how to fight back. So I read the blog. Your eye is goopy, filled with junk, and even the gold weight isn't enough to help it close. "That pretty much sums it up," I admitted. "No, it doesn't. That only sums up your eye. There's a ton more crap than that." Only Stacy could say it that way. "You're getting it all wrong. Your eye patch isn't a scab. It is a badge of honor. Own it. Don't just wear a patch. Bedazzle it. Make it yours. You're a survivor. Be proud of it." Her voice peaked as the sentence concluded. Half laughing, half crying, I agreed she was right. You are still beautiful, and your patch can be beautiful too. Bejewel it so the world will know you aren't afraid of life. It doesn't take away from who you are. It is an awesome extension of who you are. Girl, you gotta do this. Life bites sometimes, but you still get to point the direction you're going, so start going up again. She was my own personal coach, fan club, and therapist. Stacy spoke not from a naive sense of optimism, but from dirty, hard, sucks-to-go-through experience. You're right, It's time to embrace my inner pirate. Hell yeah! I want to see pictures of it on the blog when you're done, she said. Bedazzling the patches turned into a family event. The nurse had handed me a bag full of black patches the day I checked out. I didn't know until later I'd be charged $19.99 for each, but the supply allowed the crew to join the action. Lindy's jewel gun starred in the event. We spent a couple of hours selecting, arranging, and gluing the jewels onto the patches. When we finished, we were not a group of misfits. We were a band of pirates. I wore my new patch for all my waking hours. A store clerk nodded her approval and said, "Nice patch, very artistic." Little bits of encouragement pushed me to keep trying, but some days, even a decorated badge of honor didn't cut it. That's when Stacy stepped in again, this time in person. She hadn't called to tell me she was coming or checked to see if I was home. She showed up and smiled at me as she pushed her way through the door, armed with a baseball bat, a chair, and a marker. "You ready for this?" she asked. "It's time, Jodi. Take control again." Stacy always grabbed life by the horns, even when the bull ran straight for her. She set the metal folding chair in front of me and drew 3 concentric circles, a target. "What are you most sick and tired of? What drives you crazy more than anything else?" Stumbling over my words, I stared, wide-eyed at my friend. "Come on, what is it? Headaches? Drooling?" Without waiting for my response, she took a black Sharpie and started writing on the chair, filling the space in and around the target with familiar, painful words. Drippy lips, goober eye, restless limbs, dizzy spells, rashes. "Your turn," she said, handing me a marker and pointing to the chair. "Let it all out. Here." Tumor, crooked face, metal head, backaches, headaches, drooling, memory loss, slurred speech, metal mouth, knotty nose, hearing loss, sleeplessness, hair loss. The fire in her eyes shone with passion. When the list was complete, she carried the metal chair outside and handed me the aluminum bat. "Swing," she instructed. "Smash it." I swung the bat and landed a first hit. A metallic ring reverberated into the air, empowering the next, harder swing. Each time the metal bat connected with the chair, the force in my body grew stronger. Frustrations, rage, disappointments, and fears exited the tips of my fingers, and energy seared the bat like a lightning rod. When the beating ended, Stacy carried the chair into my basement and leaned it against a concrete wall. "Every time you get frustrated with all your body is not doing, come look at the chair and remember who is in control." She exited as quickly as she came. Her reminder sparked me to take my life back again. My first day back at work coincided with a company-wide staff meeting. As director of fundraising, it was my job to launch an employee giving campaign. Having started the job just before my diagnosis, I didn't know most of the hundreds of employees, nor how they would react to me. The executive director handed me the microphone, and I stepped to the podium. I'd practiced the speech, but I still wasn't sure what was actually going to come out of my mouth. I am here today to present you with a unique opportunity to change lives, not for strangers thousands of miles away, but for the local clients you help every day. The speech continued, and I explained the new donation fund to benefit the community. I stood in front of the crowd, and the words dripped from my mouth, not smooth, but deliberate. As I spoke, my soul seemed to leap out of my body. The real me, the person who had always looked out for others, stopped worrying about how others looked at me. 6 months ago, a brain tumor changed my life. A planned 5-day hospital stay turned into a 5-week stay with 3 major brain surgeries. For much of this time, I was completely bedridden, living on IV fluids and hope. Nearly 400 people filled the auditorium, but not a sound could be heard except the hum of the microphone in my hand. Whether you believe in karma, God, or anything else, one thing I learned, or perhaps was reminded of, is that one minute you can be on the giving end of life, and the next you can be on the receiving. I have been on the giving end for 33 years, but since my illness, I've been reliant on others for everything, to take care of my children, make meals, do laundry, clean my house, drive me to appointments, care for, and even bathe me. The strangers in front of me momentarily transformed into the hundreds of family, friends, neighbors, and online supporters who'd helped me through the previous 6 months. I realized if I gathered all my angels together, the auditorium would be filled to capacity. I choked back my tears to continue the presentation. I have a second chance at life, and I'm grateful to work again. It feels good to have enough strength to help someone else. Join me in creating a second chance for others by donating to the fund. Nothing. The hall was still. I turned slowly. Anxiety crept in as my eyes met the faces of a few people on the front row. Life can change in an instant. Please, take advantage of being on the giving end and make a difference today, because you never know what tomorrow holds. Thank you. I stepped out from behind the podium and smiled. I did it. The silence in the room was not deafening. It was defining. I looked at my audience again and realized I was not only changed, but changing. My protective shell began to crack. I pushed a few pieces away and stood tall and proud. Perhaps the best way to impact the world was simply to change myself for the better. Through the shadows, I saw a man stand in the second row. He started clapping, and within seconds, the applause grew louder. The dark auditorium infused with light, and I saw the entire audience stand, clapping, whistling, and staring at me. The faces that gazed into mine held no ridicule or pity, because I held none for myself. The tearful eyes and small smiles showed approval of me, just the way I was. Chapter 32. Hawaiian Sunshine. Peace is a journey of 1,000 miles, and it must be taken one step at a time. Lyndon B. Johnson. December 2011. We arrived in the land of Aloha after midnight, our Christmas gift to our family. Tolan insisted on the vacation. Mom insisted on the month. You need to rest and let your body heal. It's hard to do at home, but here you have no commitments. You don't even have to cook. And if the kids wake up before you do, I can take care of them while you sleep. Do this for yourself and your family. It was a perfect sales pitch. So, for the sake of continued recovery, I rested on the beach, mesmerized by the ocean. More than 2 years had passed since the start of my second life. Just 5 months after leaving the hospital, most of my original symptoms, dizzy spells, vertigo, ringing in the ear, and migraine-like headaches, returned in force. In a consultation with Dr. Coldwell, he said the tumor had likely pressed on my nerves long enough to cause permanent damage. The symptoms may never go away. They only retreated temporarily because of a combination of powerful but short-term anti-seizure medications. The facial paralysis we had hoped would last only a few weeks or months still held my face hostage. When the disadvantages of the gold weight outweighed the advantages, we traveled to see a surgeon in California for another unconventional procedure, one that surgically implanted a metal spring into a muscle in my eyelid to help me blink. Improvement, but still not as good as God's creation. The section around my eye was also reconstructed, my skin lifted and tucked to give the appearance of symmetry. The loss of hearing in my right ear continued to cause inconvenience and occasional embarrassment, but proved more manageable than some of the other remaining side effects. I still practice chewing and eating, and my skills continue to develop. Limited use of a few muscles returned when the nerves finally reignited their spark. My smile broadened, and even I could see intermittent glimpses of me again. Some days I fared well. Other days were kick you when you're down hard. I tried and failed to resume normal life. Learning to compromise with my body showed the only promise for the future. When I reached my goals, I inched my way to the next milestone. When I missed my goals, I adjusted my expectations and started again. With every defeat came gratitude for an imperfect life. I sat in the hot sun and reminisced on my progress over the previous 2 years. My family and health trumped my priority list, but my job fundraising for the needs of the community also fulfilled me. My cog remained small, but I helped turn the wheel of change for the good people around me. An unplanned speaking career took root in my struggles. At every conference or meeting, I encountered incredible people who fought seemingly impossible challenges but faced them head-on. We cheered for each other and related in ways only comrades can. If something about my journey inspired even one person to persevere during hard times, it was all worth it. My personal takeaway from the dozens of different speeches was always the same. Despite the hardships of my new life, I wouldn't change a thing. Sharing my story also reminded me that perhaps I could change the world, even just one life at a time. A few weeks into our vacation, we headed to the beach for adventure. Tolan pointed to our destination, a small island a few hundred yards off the coast. Goat Island is a beautiful little tropical preserve just off Malakahana on Oahu's east shore. An aerial view of the island shows a long, narrow land with limbs like arms and legs jutting out in 5 directions. The isle beckons locals and tourists to rest on its perfect, crescent-shaped beach or trek through colorful shrubbery on the cliff on the far side. Despite its closeness to land, the crossing could be easy or treacherous, depending on the day. In calm seas and low tide, the passage was a pleasant walk across the coral reef. At high tide or in rough waves, only ocean-experienced swimmers or boarders dared make the trip. The darkened sky indicated we might have chosen a precarious day for our journey. No stranger to storms, Tolan insisted we go anyway. "I don't want to do it. I'm going to drown." Kaysen's eyes widened at the sight of the tossing waves. Tolan looked directly at him. "You are not going to drown. You are going to be fine, Kaysen. You can lie down on the boogie board, and I will hold the rope the whole time. You can float to Goat Island." My little boy didn't look convinced, but Tolan heaved him on and pushed the board forward. Even in the ocean, Tolan was steady. With only one board, Kaysen was the only floater. The rest of us would have to walk or swim. Trendon followed his cousin Corey and my brother Brandon, who carried Davin on his shoulders. Lindy and I planned to navigate the underwater path together, on foot. The boys forged into the water and quickly moved several yards in front of us. We girls ventured in more cautiously than the others, grateful that their movements mapped the course we would take. Corey's head bobbed and splashed into the water. Brandon shouted, "Hole on the left!" No sooner had he said the words than my foot fell into a gap in the coral. My little companion steadied me, and we pushed on. Her turn was next. Lindy stepped forward and her whole body lunged headfirst into the waves. Instinctively, my right arm tightened, and I pulled my shoulder upward, lifting her torso out of the water. "You okay?" I blurted. She nodded. Rain began falling, wetting the only dry spots we had left, our heads and faces. The clouds hung dark and low in the sky, and the waves started breaking harder and faster. I glanced back and saw we were halfway between the 2 shores. No fast escape, no easy route to land. Pressured by the rain and clouds, I held firmly to Lindy and urged our legs to carry us faster. Efforts to run resulted in a slow motion, standing crawl through the waves. We approached the sandy shore, and a last raindrop landed like a tear on my cheek. The shower stopped before it really started. Encouraged by the return of shallow water, we raised our legs and dashed through the choppy water until we landed safely. As if on cue, the clouds parted, and a single ray of light grew until sunbeams shone and covered the little island. For the next hour, the kids buried each other in sand and then splashed into the water to clean off. Brandon spotted an intact seashell, and little bodies raced in every direction to find more ocean treasures. I discovered a little trail headed off the beach to a narrow path. The sandy soil gave way to plant-covered ground, and then to volcanic rock as I neared the edge of the small island. I gasped in awe at the sight from the bluff. The views in every direction left me breathless. Looking back to land, the beauty of the trees, sand, and waves combined into a masterful creation. The gentle breeze created a natural dialogue for the live art. The reef, covered by ocean, shielded the inlet pass and guarded her beauty and charm. To the south and east, white-capped peaks rose and fell as far as my eyes could see. Uninterrupted by the world, the waves rolled in as they had for thousands of years, not scheduled, but sure and melodic. The waves likely started on the other side of the planet, then swayed, lulled, tumbled across the miles, and finally crashed onto the beach. If the waves hadn't come so far, they probably wouldn't seem as magnificent, I thought. Then I turned back and saw the most beautiful sight of all. My 4 small children scampered in and out of the water, chasing each other and their companions. Tolan rested on the beach, observing and cheering. He caught my gaze, lifted his hand, and waved. I straightened, smiled, and returned the wave. In spite of all the things I would struggle with in the years to come, continued facial paralysis, daily migraine-intense headaches, multiple eye surgeries, and near constant dizzy spells, I marveled at the scene on the beach and knew it was all worth it. My husband still had his wife, and my children still had their mother. I seated myself on a rock near the ledge, surrounded by perfection, and tried to slow time. Like the waves, we had come far since those long, hard days in the hospital. What many called strength, we called family survival. For my part, I simply woke each morning and fought to make it through another day. Moving forward was the only way. Whether that made me courageous or brave was for others to determine. I just tried to get home. The breeze blew a long hair into my bad eye. I gently pulled the strand away and pressed my eye closed, a persistent reminder of reality. Lush vegetation had grown between the cracks in the rocks, the hard and the soft mingling together in a beautiful contradiction. Life itself often seemed like a paradox. At least my life did. As much as I didn't want squalls, the storms showered love and helped me grow. Gloomy clouds loomed in the distance, so I turned my head back toward the light. I suppose there will always be storms, but behind the clouds, the sun still shines. I closed my eye, leaned back, and basked in the sunlight as it shone on my face. The end.
Epilogue. A decade refined. The best gift is life. Live in the present. Jodi Brown. September 2020. I first saw the woman with yardstick-long, ash-brown hair at a Delta gate at LAX International Airport. Both of us arrived in airline-issued wheelchairs, waiting to board our flight to Salt Lake. We didn't exchange words, only glances. The gate attendant announced pre-boarding and indicated the two of us could start down the jetway. She carefully arose, pushed her wheelchair away, and started to stagger toward the plane. We entered the jetway hall, and, as if on a conveyor belt, she slid her left hand slowly along the wall to steady her unstable walk. Every time she put weight on her prosthetic leg, her body tilted to the right, and her left hand pressed harder to the wall. Because of surgery on my leg just days earlier, I used the long handle of my wheeled carry-on luggage as a crutch and limped toward the plane, just a few feet behind her. The woman, about 15 years my senior, turned her head toward me and said, "Whew! If I'd known how long this jetway was, I'd have stayed in the wheelchair." My agreement came out as a laugh, and we made our way slowly through the corridor. Halfway down the second ramp, she turned to me again. "You know, when people can't see my prosthetic leg, I get accused of acting drunk or being mentally ill. It's just better if I wear shorts, so they see why I'm going so slow." "Oh, that's awful," I said, hoping she felt the weight of my pain for her. We'd sat just a few feet away from each other in the terminal, and I had noticed her clothing and thought it odd for an aging woman to wear short shorts, especially with a prosthetic leg. But understanding hit me immediately upon hearing her explanation. Sadly, I knew most people would never hear the 20-second history lesson I received. They would likely judge her without knowing, just as I had only minutes before. Reserve quick judgment. You never know the whole story. Please, God, help me act on this. After making our way through the small aisle of the plane, we each got to our seats early and had plenty of room for luggage. One of the unexpected benefits of airline travel during the pandemic. Traveling alone, even after surgery, was easy in comparison to the many trips I took with my 4 children. To have no one to think about besides myself still unnerved me. Perhaps that was why I regularly scanned hallways, aisles, and rows in search of passengers in need, especially little passengers. For years, I packed snacks, Benadryl, wet wipes, spare clothes, and toys in shopping spree-sized totes, so I'd be prepared for any situation. With my parents in Hawaii for most of my children's childhoods, the kids got lots of practice waiting in airports, eating airline food, in the days when they served food, and laughing silently while they watched movies. If given the chance, I'd choose the craziness of family travel over the freedom and convenience of solo travel. Once settled in my window seat, I turned on the screen in the seat in front of me and picked up where I'd left off 2 weeks earlier, with just 30 minutes left of a documentary on Soul Surfer, Bethany Hamilton. The plane filled with passengers and took off, but I was glued to the 9-inch screen. Perhaps because I started watching it while traveling to go have surgery, her messages of hope, endurance, perseverance, and sheer determination stayed with me. The show, aptly titled Unstoppable, featured Bethany's life long before a tiger shark bit off her arm while surfing. And the movie covered the events of her life long after she got back on a surfboard. But the attack was the underlying hinge. She's like me. Her life is separated into 2 parts, before and after. No matter what else comes, our stories are forever changed by the event that split each of our lives. When the show finished, I thought of all the footage of heartache, drama, triumph, loss, sacrifice, and love that Bethany experienced in real life. With grit and grace, she gave thanks to God. What would my after movie look like? I wondered. Only in Adam Sandler movies could characters fast forward or rewind 10 years in an instant. And though I didn't want to revisit all of the moments of the previous decade, simultaneously I rejoiced that I didn't miss them. As I comfortably sat 30,000 feet above the earth, I closed my eyes and put together scenes of the movie reel of my after story. 2010. Bullet point. Attempting to figure out what the heck comes next in my new life. Balancing feelings of hope and gratitude with equally strong feelings of anxiety and mourning from my old life. Bullet point. Creating memories and strengthening relationships at a 4-generation reunion at the Brown family cabin on Hebgen Lake, Montana. And then, just weeks later, gathering together again for Grandpa Pringle's funeral, and feeling blessed that some of his final days were those we celebrated together on the lake. Bullet point. Fearing the migraines, balance issues, and extreme myalgia meant my tumor was growing back. Later, learning the MRI showed no tumor growth, but did reveal likely permanent nerve damage, which caused the ongoing symptoms. And then, crying for weeks. 2011. Bullet point. Kaysen's daily prayers that Mom's brain will start working again, followed by the realization that despite my continued issues, his prayers were being answered. Bullet point. A family cruise to the Mexican Riviera with Tolan's parents and our friends, the Rhodes, eating more food in 1 week than we thought humanly possible. Bullet point. Trying to take control of my life by taking control of my body, i.e., becoming a fitness fanatic and a push-up queen, and surprising my hubby with a video of the journey. Go to my YouTube page to check it out. Bullet point. Realizing that if I push my body too hard, my new body pushes back. No video, just months of bed and downtime. 2012. Bullet point. Braving my new normal fears and heading to the mountains for a day of skiing with the family. Enjoying the delight of watching my kids zoom by, stop suddenly, and wait for Mom to catch up. And then trying to decide which was worse. Facing my anxieties, the steep mountain slope ahead, or getting physically stuck because I was mentally paralyzed for an hour on one hill. When I finally reached the lodge, I drank a large hot chocolate to avert a meltdown and accepted that the family would be forever skiing without me. Bullet point. Sitting frozen in the parking lot, ugly sobbing, outside the mortuary before going in to see my dear friend, John Clark, at the viewing for his wife, Shelley, who died of brain cancer, and learning that survivor's guilt lives on, and I can't explain or justify why I am still here and other beloved warriors are not. Bullet point. Waving and walking away as my baby, Davin, sat in a little chair at a little table for his first day of kindergarten, knowing from that moment on my children were no longer my own. 2013. Bullet point. Our farewell trip to Laie, Hawaii, as the community said goodbye to my parents after 13 years leading the Polynesian Cultural Center before their move back to the mainland, and subsequently learning and loving what it means to celebrate like a Polynesian. Bullet point. Quitting my nonprofit job and leaving my safety net so I could take better care of myself and my family, and finally go to my therapies and doctor's appointments. Bullet point. Attending weekly writers group meetings and going through hundreds of pages of red-penned edits and critiques as I wrote my story, and later ditching 125 pages and hours of work to change from a self-help format to a creative narrative format. Maybe with some convincing, I'll share the original version someday. 2014. Bullet point. A police officer helping me onto an airplane in preparation to fly to California for emergency surgery after the spring in my eyelid broke and gouged my eyeball with every blink, followed by 3 subsequent trips to LA for surgeries to clean out a staph infection I got during the first emergency procedure. Theme of the year: everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Maybe it should be, you can't have a miracle if you don't need a miracle. And you won't make friends with the infectious disease specialists unless you have a reason to visit them. Bullet point. Winning my first major writing award, meeting with agents who were interested in my story, and then crossing my fingers, holding my breath, and praying for publication of my book. Bullet point. Summer days spent teaching a writing class to Lindy and her girlfriends. Reward for participation? A trip to a writers' conference with 3 giggly girls who stayed up way too late for a brain-fogged mom. And an additional perk? Cute giggly girls getting to meet and attend a class by the author of one of their favorite book series. And taking the kitchen sink challenge and consuming enough ice cream to make any normal person ill for days. 2015. Bullet point. Starting my own business as a professional speaker, author, and nonprofit consultant. Bullet point. Working with 2 therapists to learn pain management techniques, balance tactics, and coping skills. Bullet point. Writing the highs and lows of book publishing. Hundreds of hours of tedious hard work writing, followed by hope, submission, backdoor and side window contacts, editing, rejection, changing plans, more editing, marketing classes, cover design woes, and finally pressing send. Bullet point. Celebrating the release of The Sun Still Shines and waiting impatiently to see if people would buy, read, and like it. 2016. Bullet point. Crying out to God in prayer for remembrance and respite, and then, just minutes later, receiving a phone call from my get-her-done girl hero, Jeannie, who stayed up all night reading my book and then called, in tears, to say she loved me. Knowing, yet again, that God heard my prayers and answered them through an angel. Bullet point. My shock and delight at winning the Gold Quill Award for The Sun Still Shines, but leaving the award ceremony early because I had a date with Lindy, my mom and sister. Bullet point. Receiving a clear but unwanted prompting that I should write a book on a topic I did not want to talk about, and then accepting the heavenly invitation because God showed me that surviving depression comes down to one thing: press on. Bullet point. Escaping to Alcatraz and San Francisco to commemorate 20 years of marriage to Tolan. Walking hand in hand next to the streetcars, seemingly going uphill both ways. 2017. Bullet point. Little kids turning big, and mom and dad learning that parenting means loving your children regardless of their decisions, not trying to control their decisions. Bullet point. Adventuring with Trendon, the 2 of us alone in the Arizona wilderness, followed immediately by a family trip to New York City, adventuring with nearly every person on the planet, learning to appreciate the unique aspects of both solitude and extreme togetherness. Bullet point. Spending 3 days in the car with my dad, driving my cute Kaysen and a friend to a sports camp in the middle of nowhere, California. Feeling lucky and spoiled with so much of my dad's time for myself, and issuing huge prayers of thanks when a bus full of tourists from China found Dad's cell phone at the top of Kolob Canyon. 2018. Bullet point. Exploring Europe on a mother-daughter trip with Lindy to Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, with day trips to France and Germany. Panicking when I lost my phone, an ID, and credit cards just hours before we were scheduled to leave Venice, and dropping to my knees in gratitude after Lindy stayed calm, used her head, and led us back to the hotel room where she knew my phone was plugged into the charger. Never had I imagined I'd be able to take an adventurous trip with just the 2 of us, alone, together, navigating unfamiliar places and cultures. I loved the rush of empowerment and the bonding with my girl. Bullet point. Filming the short video, You Are Beautiful, as a message to the world about outer beauty, inner strength, and self-acceptance. And later attending the film premiere, feeling overwhelmed by love, support, and applause. And for once, watching my hubby get to be in the spotlight as the audience wanted to hear and see more of him. 2019. Bullet point. Scoring bargain tickets for the family to Paris and London for spring break. Visiting Notre Dame on my birthday, just days before it nearly burned to the ground. And climbing the Tower of Eiffel on its 130th birthday. Touring the catacombs underground and e-scootering above ground. Meeting my high school friends at London Bridge and marveling that just yesterday we were the kids having the adventures. Bullet point. Cheering at Davin's awards programs as he graduated from elementary school and prepared for junior high. The imagined movie scenes caused me to reflect, silently laugh, cry in sorrow, and clap for joy, until the calendar landed on May 2019. For 10 years, I'd imagined that when I hit my craniotomy anniversary, my second chance at life, I would feel like a conqueror, a hero returning from battle. In all of my dreams from the previous decade, I was sure my life and body would be returned to their former glorious state, and I would be well. Those tiny boxes on the calendar meant years had passed, and some parts of life remained eerily the same. Though I knew the movie scenes I chose didn't show it, the devastation of hitting that mark had engulfed me like a hurricane. A true documentary of my life would have to include dozens of days in bed that accumulated to months of time. Huge emotional swings, unlike anything in my before life, made me feel stuck on an undesired amusement park ride that never ended. New fears and anxieties appeared where before there had been stability. Everyday activities, from riding in the car to watching my kids play on the monkey bars, spiked angst that sometimes prevented me from functioning. No one wanted to watch that on any screen. Brain tumor survivor is a badge I never planned to wear. When thrust into hell, I just tried to claw my way out of the darkness. But life never returned to normal. Even after the staples came out, the scars healed, and the hair grew back. Remnant tumor tissue still pressed on my nerves. Paralysis still imprisoned my face, and changes in spinal fluid flow still caused migraines, balance issues, extreme fatigue, and intense pain. And I no longer held the naivety to believe it would change, or that I'd be able to conquer the world with a good attitude and some old-fashioned get-her-done-girl optimism. After all the miracles of surviving, I felt I no longer had the right to be discouraged. But I was. Indeed, the storms of my afterlife kept me spiraling in a funnel of frustration. During one long May day, I voiced my thoughts to my sister. "Joe, you could stay in bed every day, and no one would question your motivation for a minute. But instead, you keep trying," Christy said. "You could feel sorry for yourself, be mad at God, hide from the world, or stop living. Instead, you embrace your imperfections and you keep going." Her gentle words reached into both my heart and mind. Christy paused. "And Joe, I'm proud of you." My "I feel sorry for myself" rant stopped. In that moment, I remembered that she and so many others had trials as big or bigger than my own. And each of us has to choose this day what our focal point will be: positivity or pain. I got off the phone and paced my yard. So, 10 long years later, what had changed? The revelations drift like honey into my mind. Ever so slowly, I started to understand that living well is much more than feeling well. First-hand experience bore witness to me that the body is an astonishing and complex creation, with abilities that cannot be imitated with even the greatest technology. Though the fixes of man saved my life, they do not equal the divine human design of my before life. I realized that you don't overcome trauma or adversity. You endure it and take baby steps forward in the process. Mental health, like physical, needs time for wounds to heal. No magic pill or special formula removes the slow repair of stitching life back together, and a gash never closes perfectly. Thinking back, I finally recognized the stages of healing. The first unstable steps require 99% grit. But when you make a commitment and show up for yourself, your healing, and your family, it becomes easier to do the next time. Day after day, I still showed up. And that was exactly Christy's point. After revisiting 2019, I exhaled a long, heavy breath. I had a few minutes left before the plane descended into the Salt Lake Valley, just enough time for a few more scenes in my movie. 2020, bullet point. Booking the biggest speaking year of my career, right before a worldwide pandemic canceled everything. Bullet point. Discovering new hobbies during the pandemic shutdown, and cherishing extra hours with Lindy during her last year at home. Realizing I am a master artist when I use a paint-by-numbers kit. Bullet point. Going on a houseboat for the first time in 30 years, and realizing that dizzy spells and microburst storms equal migraine, nausea, and vomiting for mom, but just more fun for the kids. Bullet point. Filming a one-take, 12-minute video on the importance of recognizing that every person is divine by design, and riding the wave of craze and praise when the video went viral. Bullet point. Grabbing the reins and changing course, and heading to California. I laughed to myself when I got to the last scene, though I knew it was far from the last. Just 2 weeks separated me from my family, but a decade of long-awaited change transpired in the meantime. A surgical renovation. Though facial therapy exercises had strengthened a few of my facial muscles, years of muscle and nerve entropy resulted in skin and tissue sliding down and pooling at the bottom of my face. And, more critically, the deterioration deterred my attempts to hold food in my mouth, chew, and swallow, which meant less coordination and more choking. Strangely, during the COVID-19 pandemic and shutdown of 2020, potential solutions started popping up on my screen. Perhaps I was spending more time online, or maybe the Instagram algorithms honed in on my needs, but I began seeing posts and videos about surgery from the Facial Paralysis Institute. As I followed the posts from the Facial Paralysis Institute, I realized I'd seen similar videos before, and had even called once. From my initial call in 2016, I estimated it would cost a few $1,000s and a few days to go for a consultation. However, fast forward to 2020, and the same doctor in Southern California was seeing patients for consultations virtually. And thus, the terrible shutdown alerted me to a great opportunity. We met virtually with specialty facial plastic surgeon Dr. Babak Azizadeh, and discovered I was a good candidate for surgical nerve repair. We rejoiced at the prospect of progress and made plans. But when I saw the cost quote for the out-of-state, out-of-network surgery, my stomach lurched and tears fell. I debated with myself for weeks and finally decided to move forward, only to dispute my resolve and melt down again. Tolan, ever my rock, didn't wait to see who won my internal argument. He simply started the paperwork to take equity out of our home by refinancing the mortgage. When my emotions again got the better of me, he said, "Jodi, this is what money is for. Nothing could be a more worthwhile investment than improving your quality of life." My hero, my advocate, my other half, my husband. As if reading my worried mind, a friend surprised me and started a GoFundMe campaign to help with the costs of surgery and travel. In a little over a month, family, friends, and strangers donated $15,000, which came with a much higher emotional payoff. So, with my sister Tammy as my escort, funmaker, and caregiver, I flew to California during the craziness of 2020. The two Orgill girls biked the Venice Beach boardwalk, dined at the Cheesecake Factory, and paraded the streets of Beverly Hills, as much as COVID allowed. Friends treated us to salmon and shrimp on the barbecue, and extended family members stopped by our Airbnb to visit. Because of the pandemic, I Ubered to the surgery center and faced the day alone. But after all the emotional ups and downs to get there, no fear remained. Perfect calm settled in, even as I waited for the doctor to arrive and for anesthesia to tingle my veins. Dr. Azizadeh entered the building right by the room where I waited. Instead of jitters and last-minute questions, we engaged in meaningful dialogue, and he even shared stories of his early childhood when he fled with his family to the United States. He had one chance and one bag to start his life new, and he chose books over clothes. My heart skipped a beat. He lived with before and after, too, and he spent every minute of his new life changing lives for the better. With that, I no longer felt just calm. I was filled with peace, and I was ready to proceed. After the procedure, Dr. Azizadeh called Tammy with the good news that everything had gone perfectly. He surgically removed a 9-inch nerve that extended from my mid-calf to my foot, and sewed it to the end of a promising nerve on the left, the normal side of my face. If the connection proves successful, the new section of nerve will bond to the original and create one long nerve that swoops from my left cheekbone across my upper lip and to the top of my right cheekbone. The nerve procedure was the first in a 2-part process. The second surgery, tentatively scheduled for spring 2021, will be a gracilis muscle transfer, which requires harvesting a muscle from my inner thigh and then implanting it in my cheek, along with accompanying arteries, veins, and nerves. Though the second half of the process is more complicated and risky, if the transfer works, the new nerve should power the muscle and improve functionality and symmetry in my face. For 5 days after surgery, Tammy thankfully organized and controlled everything. She slept on the floor next to my bed and kept tabs on my condition, then woke me during the night to give me medication. Though I couldn't truly eat, she blended protein smoothies, mashed potatoes, and ensured me full of calories. Tammy turned recovery time into a girls' week. We binged Victorian-era chick flicks and great conversation between appointments. With practiced confidence, she changed bandages, checked my surgical drains, and recorded oh-so-not-fun post-op moments. Side note, for any interested reader with a strong stomach, watch video Surgery Update 6 on my Facebook page. When the doctor gave us the thumbs up and assured us my recovery was on track, Tammy completed her caregiving practicum and flew home to Salt Lake. I stayed for another week at a step-down recovery unit, aka my cousin's house. The Dickens family filled their fridge with yogurt, eggs, gourmet mashed potatoes, protein drinks, applesauce, and smashed foods galore. The surplus of soft serve foods made life easier that week, but the surplus of friendship, hospitality, and love made life infinitely better. Brandon's 5-star car rides, nature walks, and sightseeing trips convinced me that downtime can be good time when you are with the right people. Tawny and I chatted for hours and never found a topic that didn't engage us in conversation. I watched in awe as cute Lainey twirled, leaped, and spun around the living room with the beauty of a dancing fountain. Their waffle breakfast celebration for Lainey's 12th birthday made me feel like one of the family, while simultaneously making me miss my own family. By the time Brandon took me to the airport, I was already planning a future get-together for our families. Every interaction is an opportunity to change a life, and my cousins certainly changed mine. The plane landed smoothly, and I limped through the aisle toward the gate, where a wheelchair waited for me. Though I'd just been sitting all day, I felt spent by the time I fell into the seat. My new friend with the prosthetic leg sat in a wheelchair nearby. A few minutes of conversation later, an airline worker arrived to push her chair to her next gate for her flight home. "Don't worry, hon. It gets better," she said, and she turned to go. Our hours-old friendship had already yielded plentiful fruit. A young man came to attend to me, which meant riding out of the airport into the freedom and comfort of home. On the short trip out of Gate D, I thought about my beloved family, whom I looked forward to greeting again. My grown entrepreneur man-son runs 3 side-hustle businesses at any time, but still smiles like the Trendon who turned 10 just days before his mom went into the hospital. The little girl who once followed me around eventually followed both her parents to college. Lindy attends BYU and is exploring a major in computer science. Larger-than-life Kaysen still protects his mom, but he is no longer little. He drives me to appointments in stores instead of the other way around. My baby boyfriend, blue-eyed, blonde-haired Davin still gives me hugs, but he idolizes his engineer dad, and he knows no other way of life than our new normal. As Kaysen's regular MMA and boxing partner, he steps in as protector whenever needed. But it was Tolan, my anchor, fixer, and forever companion, who met me in the pickup lane outside the airport. The airline worker pushed the wheelchair next to the car, and my husband loaded my luggage in the trunk and then rushed to my side. Tolan's arms wrapped around me in a hug, and then he helped me into the front seat. Once in the car, he grinned at me and momentarily laid his hand on mine. "You ready?" I nodded my approval. In seconds, he maneuvered the car away from the airport terminal and onto the freeway, once again headed for home, healing, and hope. The end. The sun still shines, in memory of Nancy Beckstead Howard, who taught me that living and dying can be done with faith, gratitude, and dignity. In memory of George E. Pringle, the miracle maker, whose faith in God surpassed all else. In memory of Virus Anderson Orgill Lisenby, forever my Grandma B, angel, teacher, and example, my role model for how to live, forgive, and love unconditionally. In memory of Mona Ray Heaton Ketchum, my newest angel and sweet grandmother, whose most often uttered words to me were, "You are beautiful." In honor of Jodi Burton Carlson, the other Jodi B, who set the example for my second life with her stalwart strength, wit, and won't give up attitude. In honor of Heidi Kerrigan Shaw, my dear friend who shows me every day that you can always choose to walk forward with faith. Acknowledgements. More than ever, I am grateful to God for the gifts of family and time. During and post-brain tumor, I haven't known if I had much time left. I feel I have lived an entire life in the last decade alone. Countless hard days trap me in bed, but God continues to send earthly and heavenly helpers to my aid, as He will with all who ask. Each time I knock, He opens with arms full. Every interaction is an opportunity to change a life, and I am grateful to those who choose daily to show love in simple moments and interactions, and thereby change lives for the better. My parents, Vaughn and Sherry Orgill, stand as role models for what parenting should look like. Though I am 44 years old, my mother still loves and longs to take care of me and the other 25 plus members of her family. Faith and family are the center of all she does. My father jumps first and invests himself in anything I am involved in. He is a pillar of strength and righteousness. All I can hope to do is be the Jodi they think I already am. My siblings, Christy and Jamin, Tammy and Dave, Scott, Brandon and Michelle, Michael and Aaron, and Rhett and Lindsay, are my teammates, emotional rocks, and my closest friends. Brandon bear hugs me through every high and low and infuses me with love. Tammy acts as one of my fiercest advocates and most tender caregivers, even when her own family is in the midst of great struggles. She encourages me to vent to her, even though she's heard it a million times. She is my constant and my best friend. I couldn't walk this journey without her. My in-laws, Larry and Kay Brown, are solid in their love, support, and participation in my family's lives. I treasure the countless hours we spend together building and repairing family projects and properties. They are wonderful second parents and dear friends. I never imagined that I would give birth to my best friends and greatest blessings, Trendon, Lindy, Kaysen, and Davin. My children amaze me with their talents, wit, humor, dedication, passions, abilities, and compassion. They are better versions of Tolan and me, and I'm forever grateful for every earthly day as their mom. Though they are no longer little, they forever have my heart, energy, and love. My husband Tolan needs more than a sentence of mention. God brought us together and ensured each of us that we really are a match made in heaven. We have needed that heavenly reassurance many times, and I give thanks to Him for keeping us together. Tolan was instrumental in this anniversary book edition. He revisited painful moments to provide insight and perspective I could not provide. Marriage to a brain tumor survivor is much harder than marriage to a get-her-done, fully abled individual. As my plate emptied of tasks and to-dos in exchange for rest and recovery, Tolan's plate filled with all of the tasks left undone. He still willingly takes on additional responsibilities and continues to be patient, even when I struggle with crazy brain days, high emotions, seemingly pointless tears, extreme fatigue, compromised vision, and limited physical abilities. Tolan bears the weight of my chronic condition more than any other person, including me. I am beyond grateful for his patience, loyalty, and love. To my dear friend, Gonzalo Arellano Pino, you will never know how much your little blonde lady adores you. You infuse me with love, support, humor, and strength in every interaction. And you encourage my sass and attitude, which I love. Te amo, mi amigo querido. I never imagined, nor do I like to admit, that I need so much ongoing help and care. Special love and thanks to my inner circle of friends who keep me and my family going even when I struggle to ask for help. This is not a full list, but a few of my biggest angels need acknowledgement because they continue to show up and instill hope at every turn. Diana, Celeste, Brittany, Nick and Darla, Cami and Eric, Craig, Greg, Dan, Brandon and Debbie, JD, Annette and Adam, and Cindy. The miracles of my recovery were aided by dedicated individuals who intervened at the right times. Heartfelt thanks to the surgeons who took chances, researched, and got creative, but never gave up. Dr. William Coldwell, Dr. Clough Shelton, Dr. Richard Orlandi, and Dr. Robert E. Levine. I am also grateful for the ongoing care of Dr. Mikio Obayashi, Dr. Sidney Piercy, and Dr. Babak Azizadeh. Thanks to the wonderful communities of Riverdale, Utah, Orem, Utah, Warrenton, Virginia, and Laie, Hawaii, for supporting my family through it all. Thanks to my brain tumor and facial paralysis friends who helped me figure out the next steps on this beautiful journey of life. As a note to my dear friends, please know that each of you starred in this book at one point in time, but editors and reviewers told me I shared too many stories about my friends. What a wonderful problem. You are in my heart, even if not in the book.
For more information, visit www.authorjodibrown.com. This has been The Sun Still Shines, written and narrated by the author, Jodi Orgill Brown. Copyright 2015. Production copyright 2016 by Fulfill Publishing and Amplifying Development.